Hello, welcome to Cinema Savvy. We are up to the 18th film in our James Bond Retrospective series with 1997's Tomorrow Never Dies, directed by Roger Spottiswoode. We are pretty much midway through the Pierce Brosnan era right now, much to George's excitement, I'm sure, getting ever closer to that one film he wants to talk about in 2 weeks' time. Last week, of course, we covered Goldeneye with Spy Hards, which was a fantastic review and just an all-round great Bond film, really. What a way to kickstart the 90s era. And this movie is also exceptionally 90s, it being 1997. And as always, we've got some people joining us now. The aim of the game right now, this is going to be a roundtable discussion. We're going to go into everything. Pierce Brosnan himself in this film, a bit of the behind-the-scenes stuff with the film, the villain, the Bond girls, everything. There's so much to unpack with this film. This was a really fun one for me, especially just right off the bat, not seeing it before. But we'll get into that in just a second. But before we do, we'll wait for some more people to jump in. Over to George with the socials.
Yeah, guys. So as we said, we want you to comment along with us. Obviously, we're live. This is going to be, I think, the last live one for a couple of weeks at least, which is a little hint. So we'll bring the comments as normal. And if we're not live, if this is pre-recorded, then like next week's, we'll be in the chat as well, commenting along, looking at the stuff. So do get involved, hit that like button, do subscribe. But as we said, we're unfortunately halfway into the Brosnan era now. Then we've got 2 more weeks. Then we've got the Daniel Craig era. So we're not done yet. Quite a few things happening. And I'm going to really quickly bring up the schedules to see where we obviously announced a lot of new Bond videos. This week finishes the next tiles. We're wrapping up Tomorrow Never Dies. Then we're moving on, as we said, to Daniel Craig, and we've got a couple more videos coming on the way over the next few months. So check out our discussion video on the channel from a couple of weeks ago. We go over everything we're going to be doing. So have a look at that if you've liked these Bond videos, because we've absolutely loved it. But going back to those social medias, if you don't follow us, you should. We post a lot more now, a lot of Bond memes, Bond GIFs. A lot of Bond things happening all over Twitter these days. So hit us up on there. That's Twitter at cinema_savvy, Facebook.com/cinemasavvy, letterboxd.com, where we obviously log these films and everything we cover. And of course, we have a link to TeePublic in that description below. But as we said, we are here talking Tomorrow Never Dies. And I think as we now approach the more modern films, this is the first Bond film that came out after myself and Tayte were born. Sorry, Chris, I know that technically Goldeneye would have been yours.
Yeah.
But handing over to Tayte, do you have any memories watching this when you were younger? Because I think it's going to be something that's going to crop up now for the rest of the series, isn't it? The first time watching or being certain ages when things came out.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I actually saw this before I saw Goldeneye. I don't know why that was the case. I think it was because at the time I was collecting these limited edition kind of MGM releases and stuff like that, and I didn't get them all at the same time. I was kind of got enough pocket money to get one in order and stuff like that, and I would pick a random film. I haven't seen that Bond film, so really I jumped all over the place with kind of the order that I originally watched the Bond films in. And I think I got this one before Goldeneye because I liked the cover of it, and I remember liking the cover of it on the actual DVD. So my memories of this film, I actually quite enjoyed it. As a kid, I have no idea why. That may be kind of telling towards my opinions on the review itself. But when I was a kid, I enjoyed the action sequences in this film. Some of them really stuck out to me, which I'm sure we'll go into when we talk about it in discussion. However, on rewatch, my thoughts may have changed.
Well, I'm very interested to see how this discussion goes, because also we've got a comment from Nikolai right here who says, this is going to be fun. I got some stuff to say about this film. He's very, very cryptic with that. So maybe he's on your side with that, Tayte. I don't really have any fancy first-time watching story, as many of you probably know. I watched it this weekend for the first time. I watched it on Sunday evening. What I will say is, though, I was really in the mood to get back to watching the James Bond films because, with Goldeneye, we watched it quite a lot earlier than everything else. I think we watched it before we did our License to Kill review, if memory serves. So we were kind of, backdated with a lot of stuff, and it was a long gap. And this, George, I wanted to race on ahead and just watch all of the Brosnan films straight afterwards. I was in the mood for it, but I wanted to wait and sort of get it watched in close proximity to when we do the review. So I was ready for it. So this Sunday, after a week away, I was like, let's get to another Bond film. So I was raring to go for another one, and I knew pretty much nothing about this one, which is also kind of the case about next week's that we'll do as well, The World Is Not Enough. And I only had, when I was looking for GIFs when we did the post on the weekend, I saw that Jonathan Pryce was in the film and had a vague recollection somewhere of seeing that clip of him in that kind of dark boardroom with the glasses on, and I never put two and two together that he was a Bond villain in any films, but I remembered seeing that clip somewhere, so it kind of jogged my memory and was like, oh, okay, this is the one with Jonathan Pryce in. But besides that, I knew absolutely nothing about this film, went in absolutely cold, and initial opinions, I had a blast with this one, going into it, and kind of, from the spy hards, and everyone's being very protective of spoilers and very cagey, and I thought maybe this was a really bad one and one that I'm not meant to like, and it's kind of, really divisive or something like that. So I went in with that preconceived idea, expecting it to be really bad, and I came away going, this was an absolute riot. Like, I had a great time with this one.
I think a big thing of that is that I think because you've not seen them, to be fair, as we said, the Bond fans have been the best at tune in and stuff and online. They're very nice with spoilers like that. They don't care. The film's been out for what 20 almost 25 years now, and they're still not putting stuff. So again, fair play. And also, please don't put anything. Chris, like I said, once we get past Dine of the Day, comment whatever you want, but don't put any spoilers for World. It's not enough. Or for Dine of the Day, yeah. But this is a weird one with me. So obviously, my introduction to Bond was like nothing. I'll get into that properly next week. But I didn't see this until after I saw Pirates of the Caribbean. Because I didn't see Pirates of the Caribbean until the first one, until Dead Man's Chest came out. And I remember watching this like, he's in James Bond. Like, I had no idea. This would have been probably just after Casino Royale, I reckon. I didn't have it on DVD. It must have been on TV because I've never had this until I got the box set. And this is one that I didn't dislike it, but I didn't love it. But it was like, Goldeneye was the best one. Dine of the Day was that one, and I loved that. And that was the first one I saw at the cinema. The World Is Not Enough was the one that I was attached to the most with the game and everything. And this one's kind of like fell out this radar with the Brosnan era, that because it didn't mean anything to me personally, I'd never held it in a high regard. And I'd like, even today, if I'm going to pop on a Brosnan film, this is the bottom of the four, and that's not based on the film's quality. That's just based on the attachment. And I think as we are getting more modern, the attachments to the Bond films, to the iterations of Bond becomes more clear, and the people we've had on, we'll obviously talk about growing up in the 80s, the really 007 guys, and everyone does have attachments to their era of Bond. And I see that absolutely with the Brosnan stuff. So it was a really interesting dynamic coming back to, because this is the first time I've seen this in probably about 9 years. I've not seen this many times, probably 3 or 4 times total. But obviously, the key things with this film, obviously the big set pieces, which we'll get to, but watching this with today's lens, not even talking about what's happening in Afghanistan, but the way, like, I'm quite politically orientated now, I was surprised at how incredibly well this film has held up and how real it is. I know it's not real, it's James Bond, but in terms of the themes, this is probably as real as it's going to get, and it might get for a very long time. So that was really fascinating, sort of watching this film a little bit older.
Yeah, no, I was going to say, because Nikolai's come in on the comments here, calling it a £5 version of The Spy Who Loved Me, feeling more like a generic 90s action film. I think just from the general impressions, before we go properly in discussion, like, for me, as a 90s action film, I would have loved that as a kid. I would have loved kind of the big set pieces and everything like that. And it's quite a serious topic for the film. It's a ridiculously serious topic for the film. Like you said, probably one of the most realistic and accurate kind of, if there was ever to be a Bond villain that was in real life, this kind of feels like it's taken straight from a real life person. It feels like it's been represented over the years since the film has been released. So maybe the problem for me, at least, was that it felt cheesy in some places, and that didn't play off well against kind of the serious nature of it. And maybe that's just a modern thing that I'm kind of going to have to wrap my head around and stuff like that to get to enjoy the film. But I'm sure we'll go into that when we kind of get, a deeper dive into it.
I mean, there are some serious elements to the film for definite. I did want to bring up these.
Yeah.
Some people sharing their first times with this film, which is great. We've got Carl saying, this film officially opened my local Odeon. It was a star-studded affair with some C-list celebrities attending, and they had the Bond car there as well. I'll always remember it. And also Nikolai above says, I never owned this film until I bought the 50th anniversary Blu-ray set. It used to be on German TV quite a lot. I'd be very interested to hear from a German perspective what people think of Dr. Kaufman. We'll get into him in the review, because I mean, that's going to be an absolute riot talking about him. But going back to what you said, Tayte, about how you felt sort of, the more ridiculous elements, Kaufman probably included, but like the action stuff kind of took away from the seriousness of it. It does have serious elements, but I think inherently it still feels very much like a Bond film, and it's that balancing act of the campy stuff. And I would go so far as to say that Goldeneye is probably more campy than this one with some of the stuff that happens in it. But this still does have its elements, and I don't think it's a Bond film if it doesn't have those elements to it, unless you go for the really, obviously serious ones like the Craig era, where that's kind of, veering away from the campy stuff. But I do agree that it does, by the end of the film, it does kind of feel very much like almost like a generic 90s action film. And I became very aware of it. And it's when on the submarine at the end, and I can see the comparisons to The Spy Who Loved Me as well. I was going to bring that up myself. But Pierce Brosnan feels like he's the running gun at the end. Like he almost feels like he's Arnold Schwarzenegger out of Commando. He's strapped. He's got like 2 machine guns. He's just going like the Terminator, room to room, gunning everyone down. And that didn't feel like Bond to me. That did feel more like sort of a regular kind of run-of-the-mill action thing. But the thing is that Brosnan plays the action really well. He does have, like, I'd say the more Bond elements come from like the first half of the movie, and then definitely by the sort of like the final half, maybe the helicopter bike chase, that does kind of turn into more of like an action kind of film with him in there. But George, what you mentioned about how it's held up really well, especially from the villain side of things, I completely agree with that as well. And, we see that in the news, like even now, and I definitely think it's held up well. And that was a thing of the writer as well. So Bruce Firestein, who was one of the writers, is the only credited writer, but I think that the script had a bunch of writers come on board because it was a very tight schedule for this film, which we'll get into in a second, incredibly tight. But Firestein mentioned that when he was writing the script, he aimed to, quote, write something that was grounded in a nightmare of reality. And I think he absolutely achieved that with the villain and the whole angle of the media mogul side of things.
Yeah, and it's a really good sort of segue into there's not masses, for the first time in many Bond films, we've not got issues on the production, really. The big thing with this is obviously Goldeneye was such a hit, and this is the film, the game's not even out at this point in time, that MGM really wanted the sequel done well. So they were becoming a public trading company, and they basically given Eon that deadline of, I think it would have been November 97. They had to meet that deadline, no questions asked, no nothing. The film had to come out, it had to go to schedule. And so going with what you both said, this is what I'll get into in the film. This is, I think, the most formulaic of any of the 4 Brosnan films. In terms of the Bond formula, this is by the numbers. And I think because of YMGM pressure that we must meet these deadlines, we've got to do this, I think that's where that kind of comes into it, that they knew what they were doing. But the fact that obviously, as well, this is the first film about Cubby Broccoli, we know that he didn't work as much on Goldeneye. But that's also a massive thing for sort of Barbara and Michael G. Wilson to be in fully control and have MGM telling them, you've got to make it at this date. Obviously, ifs and buts, but they probably wouldn't have been able to tell Cubby Broccoli, you're releasing this on November 1997. He'd have had the power to have swayed a couple of things, but I think a lot of the issues come down to the pressure. And Michael G. Wilson said that of every Bond film he worked on, this had the tightest deadlines, and we sort of look and laugh now that 6 years we're waiting for No Time to Die, 4 years post Skyfall, that in modern day filmmaking, a 2-year gap is not a long amount of time. Whereas back in the studio system in the 60s of your Connery era, you easily get a film out every year. But even in the late 90s, a film every 2 years, that's quite a task. And there was even a 3-year gap from World Is Not Enough to Die Another Day. So it's a really interesting one when you sort of read into it. But also a massive thing with this film, and I know, Chris, we spoke about this when you first watched it, this came out on the exact same day as the Titanic, which is, it's even more bizarre that, nobody would have known in 97 that Titanic would go on to be the biggest box office hit at the time, and it did stay in cinemas for like 10 months or whatever. But looking back in hindsight as we easily can, very dumb. Obviously, again, they wouldn't have known, but I'd imagine in 97 Titanic was still a very big thing. If there was going to be a film about the Titanic being done by James Cameron, you'd really want that opening alongside a Bond film. And again, it made its money back. It did well financially, but looking at that, if someone said to you, "Oh, imagine the film that came out the same day as the Titanic," you'd assume it was a bomb, but it was James Bond, and it still did all right, which is incredible.
Yeah, it's really interesting because I had absolutely no idea about any of the kind of production problems or the tight deadlines and stuff like that. Also, looking here, There seemed to be writing issues as well, and a lot of disputes over the scripts, and the fact that the script writing process was finished late because of the disputes over that. It does kind of show in some parts of the film. And like you said, it's very formulaic, and maybe that was because they were given that tight deadline and given those writing disputes. They just thought, you know what, we're just going to stick it to a formula. We know it works. It will always work with Bond films, and we'll go along with it. But yeah, no, releasing the film on the same day as the Titanic, obviously they wouldn't have known how big the Titanic film was going to be. But the fact that it still was able to make money kind of shows how good Bond films have been in the past and how much of a following they have. Like, if it was a different franchise, I don't think it probably would have made any money at all. But the fact that it was a Bond franchise, it's something that's been around like since the 60s and stuff like that, something that people have grown up with and are at this stage kind of passing down to their kids or their kids' kids and stuff like that. As the films go on, it's gathered such kind of a following that it can release next to, well, what was at the time the biggest film of all time, and still do okay off it. But it's really interesting to know that they had those issues going into the film. I mean, most Bond films don't come out the kind of woodwork completely unscathed. There's always some kind of problem going into it. I feel, especially with the later on films, there seems to be more and more problems cropping up. But no, with this film in particular, I feel like it's one of the ones that shows it almost the most from my personal kind of perspective. But no, it's interesting to note.
I'm not opposed to like a safe Bond film, really. You know, God, how many? It's the reason that it's gone on for 25 films now, right? With the formula they've got, it's a winning formula, and when they stick to it, you know, I am all for when they branch off in a brand new direction, like License to Kill. You know, very, very different film. I'm all for films like that as well. But I mean, this opened number 2 at the box office, so still very decent. And I know George, you looked at the adjusted for inflation figures as well, and it did relatively well, all things considered. It was interesting watching the film though, especially at the beginning, with the drill, which looks like one of the house robots from Robot Wars, just like drilling into the ship. And you know, it's all flooding and there's people drowning, and I was watching it and I was getting mad Titanic vibes from it. Only found out afterwards that it opened at the same time, so I don't know if there was some, you know, competitive thing going on, because you see that with films sometimes. Probably not, it's probably a coincidence, but I was watching it maybe because it was, you know, a 90s film and the sinking and everything like that and the life jackets and people in the water, but I did immediately think Titanic, so it's kind of interesting that it opened at the same time as that film. We would have had a great double feature again, like when I watched Moonraker, then going straight into Fast 9. That was a great double feature. But and yeah, like the pressure going into this film, like fair play to them, because I don't think any of the producers, of course, they don't want to make a dud Bond film. You know, they want to turn a profit. They want, you know, and I think because it's a family-owned thing as well with Barbara, they don't want to make a bad film. But I think with the death of Cubby Broccoli, that's a massive hit. I mean, they knew it was going to happen, but still, for that to happen, the film's dedicated to him as well at the end credits. And then MGM kind of breathing down their necks. Any other kind of production or any other film would have buckled under the pressure. And, you know, in other situations that we see, whenever there's a writer's strike on, you get a quantum of solace, which, you know, I am going to give a fair shake again when I do a rewatch on that one. But when you have these like immense things going on in the production world, sometimes you see the knock-on effect, whether there's like an actor who's not really invested in the project anymore, whether they have to cut costs, or whether, you know, it just looks cheap or something like that. But I never got that with this one. If I didn't know that there was all these things going on, script problems, I think they even mentioned, I think the producer mentioned that they didn't have a script for day one of shooting. They didn't have a finalized finished script, which is mad. But, you know, so many big blockbuster films even have that problem to this day. You hear about films where they started filming without a script, and some turn out great. I do concede your point, Tate, that it does feel probably quite formulaic compared to some, but I still think there's a lot of interesting things in this film regarding, as I mentioned, the villain and the initial concept of the villain. I thought was a brand new direction, and, you know, with Goldeneye modernizing it for a 90s audience, I think that continuing that into this film with that media outlet angle was a very different villain from what we've seen before. You could argue a similar kind of plan. He wants to create a World War III, but it wasn't, you know, to create a utopia or to have him rule the world or anything like that. It was, he wants to rule the media world, which I thought was a really interesting angle. And also going to what Nikolai says, I know that Nikolai wasn't too keen on Brosnan's performance in Goldeneye. I know he mentioned it felt very probably beginner's nerves almost, having the reins to this character and coming into it. But I do think that Brosnan, not to say that I hated him or disliked his performance, I thought he was great in Goldeneye, but he does feel, as he mentions, a lot more confident in the role of Bond in this one, I think.
Yeah, it's a really good point with this, and I think when you've had that first film, and you got to think where Brosnan was at the time as well. The Hidden Remington Steele, he was coming. Bond hadn't been around for 6 years as well. So many variables, and the film was a humongous hit. And it's obviously there'll only be 6 actors that'll ever know what it's like to be Bond at the moment, and I couldn't imagine the pressure. And as every newer one comes in, you're Lazenby, you're dealing with Roger Moore. Sorry, you're dealing with Connery. And then you got to look at Dalton. You're now being compared to Connery and to Roger Moore. And then with Brosnan, he's got all of them, Craig, all of them. And as every actor comes in, there's going to be this sort of further drive where, they've got to get the casting right and they've got to get it right for the film. And they absolutely nailed it. And he's definitely more comfortable. You watch him in this film and it's James Bond. And in Goldeneye, you definitely know he is Bond. But certainly, I think by her mannerisms, he certainly feels more at home in this one. And I think that's also another thing with the producers of the script as well, is that they don't need to advertise here is a new era of James Bond. Goldeneye, so much of it is themed on the Russian stuff with all the Cold War. And in this one, you can move on and start to move into the next century and all that kind of stuff. So it's really fascinating looking at how they approach each of these films. And by the whole concept of Carver as the villain, I think is the perfect way to do it. And also, it's 1997 that, you don't want to be stuck in the Cold War, which was mainly the 80s and 70s. And, Goldeneye was the epilogue to all that. That this was a film they needed to... If this film had been Russians as the villains again, it would have been dated quite badly. And even sort of, and this is off point, speculating about No Time to Die, Daniel Craig getting, what's his name, sacked? Danny Boyle sacked, because Danny Boyle wanted some usual Russian to the bad guys. And I'll say fair play, Craig, because we don't need another boring... it was the Russians all along post-Cold War. So this was the film where if they hadn't moved on, I think the franchise could have got lost as well.
And like you guys said, this is a very different style of villain. It's absolutely masterfully played by Pryce, Jonathan Pryce.
Yeah.
I almost forgot his name then. But it is the future war. And especially for that time and especially now, what's the war's going to be fought with? It's going to be fought with information. It's going to be fought with media, and that's kind of evolved into social media even. And that kind of character, we were kind of discussing beforehand that, some people, including myself, thought, it's Rupert Murdoch, but it's based off of Maxwell instead, isn't it?
Robert Maxwell, yeah.
Robert Maxwell, yeah, including kind of his death later on in the film, which is apparently very similar to his death. Which is really interesting that the Bond film would kind of go so close and so similar to a real world event and go in that direction. It's quite ballsy to do that. An interesting thing that I've just found out from the Wikipedia, even the name of the film is slightly wrong. They were originally going to call it Tomorrow Never Lies, and it was a typo that changed it to Tomorrow Never Dies, which I just find absolutely fascinating. The fact that kind of typo, it's a great Bond title. Tomorrow Never Lies would have worked as well as a good Bond title, but the fact that kind of changed that, I think that's quite funny.
It's like what Bob Ross says, there are no mistakes, just happy accidents. Definitely a much better title, I think, with the one that we got. We have Lorenzo in the comments as well, sharing some of his thoughts on the film. He's mentioned the David Arnold soundtrack. We will get to that later. Yeah. Be sure that the music section of this is going to be immense. Sorry, everyone. It's going to be another big one today. And he mentions that Tomorrow Never Dies is underrated. Fantastic Bond film. I love all the amazing action sequences in the film. And the story, he finds the story interesting, and Elliot Carver is a fantastic villain. He absolutely is, and we'll get onto him in a second. But we mentioned sort of like the breakaway from the Russians, which the film absolutely is. But the opening scene is an arms deal between Russians. So, we need to go into that, I think. So
Russians, Americans, just general war criminals. And
and actually, this has blew my mind as well. I'm all over the place with this one. There's so many thoughts, so many things going on with this. On the Wikipedia, apparently, Gerard Butler is credited as a HMS Devonshire seaman.
No.
This must have been one of his first ever films. This is mad.
And the guy from Downton Abbey, the main character from it, had a role as well.
Hugh Bonneville.
That's it. You do get that. I feel like we did a film like a couple of years ago where it's like you could just spot somebody famous when they were really young. It's unintentional. But you got to think the Bond film, and this is what I was chatting to on Reddit. Is like, I was like, I'm pretty sure Jared Butler's done a couple of films on submarines before. Like, was there something going on because he was in this as well? And it's a really interesting one when you get the sort of the younger. Yeah, it's like a Band of Brothers. I always say it's like every British actor that got big in the 10 years that followed at some point were in Band of Brothers, which is amazing. But sort of heading into that pre-credit scene, I want to bring up something that's always really weird, right? And this is the only thing that stands out in a weird way of this film and Bond. When they've got a new code name for him, the White Knight, it's the ultimate, we know James Bond's here. We're not going to reveal James Bond. We're going to have the biggest reveal ever. And we're not even going to give you his code name, which is 007. We're going to code name the code name. And I don't mind it. I really enjoy the scene because it's just showing how sort of, inefficient that Navy guy was. And obviously he keeps cropping up later on. But I think it's a solid... Again, I keep saying it's Brosnan, to me, has got the best pre-credit scenes. And this is another great one. It's very similar to Goldeneye, and it's not as good as Goldeneye. But this has a GTA effect of a vehicle going one-on-one with another one on a runway, which makes absolutely no sense. But I love it.
I don't know if I can say that I love it in any way, shape, or form, purely because it is so similar to Goldeneye. It's set in the snow. It's like an arms deal. It's just, it feels like it's just been copied and pasted, and I would have liked to have seen some differing variety. I do agree with you that Pierce Brosnan does have the best opening scenes, and they kind of go for more of an action beat, whereas the earlier Bond films were either just kind of information towards the story or a very, very quick chase scene, whereas these feel like proper, full-on kind of action scenes that get you into the mood for a Bond film and really get you into the film. I think that helped with the modernization of films from Goldeneye, because previously you had kind of more based around the spy-ness of Bond. It started to creep in with the Dalton era, but now we're getting into the more of the action side of it, and that being the forefront and everything like that. But with this one, I do feel like it is a complete copy and paste, and it's not as good as Goldeneye. So, yeah.
I'm going to completely disagree with you too. I think it only gets similar when you get to the runway section, and that was even different in Goldeneye, where he ramps the bike off, doesn't he, and then free falls into the plane and takes off with no soundtrack. We do get a soundtrack in this one, which is a big thing that we'll talk about, which was very nice. I got the soundtrack to this film's incredible, but I think it's totally different. I think in Goldeneye you established the sort of the working relationship between him and 006, and there was more comedic quips in there, and there was the bungee jump sequence, whereas this one was pretty much just a ticking clock. Like Bond, you need to get there, you need to stop that missile from hitting that place, you need to get everything out of there. So I thought that the stakes were different in the opening scene. I guess it's got Russians again, it involves planes again, but I do think they do some very different things with it, especially like sort of like the aerial combat. You have Pierce Brosnan's pain face, which I've been looking out for since Goldeneye, and it's right here from the opening scene. It's just the neck flaring, the chin up, the gritted teeth. It was fantastic. But and then you have your Top Gun moment as well. The I was inverted kind of thing with the two planes on top of each other. Great one-liner, backseat driver to kick the film off really nicely. So I thought it was a solid opening. You can see the money on the screen. You can tell we're very much into sort of like the late 90s with this one, with CGI torpedo flying over the mountains and everything. It was all very exciting. It was all very dramatic. But I like how it kept cutting back to M as well, and the oh god, what's his name? Admiral Roebuck, who's just like being completely incompetent and awful. And I actually thought they were going to do more with Roebuck, and I'll probably get onto that if we. I don't know if we've got a section talking about M or if I should just bring it up now, because it's really one of the only times that I can talk about it. Then. I thought they were going to have like this whole dynamic where, because there's like this power struggle you see between the two of them at the start, where it's like, thank you, M, that'll be all, we'll take it from here. And then there's that moment where she's like standing in the background. She's like, no, I'm not standing for any of this. And then she walks up and she wants to get involved. I thought they were going to have a thing, we're kind of taking over your department, M, like... Don't interfere in our affairs, and they don't really follow up with that, and I thought they were setting that up from the beginning, but we see what a film does when it gives M and Moneypenny a side quest in a film, and it doesn't usually always work, does it? So maybe that's a blessing they didn't do that, but I thought it was a tremendous opener, really good opener, really, really solid. And if all the Brosnan ones are like an action beat, I'm really excited to see what The World Is Not Enough and Die Another Day have in store. Although I think Die Another Day is probably the tidal wave one? Is that
I mean that's not
no? Okay.
from that part of the film.
Well, don't tell me what it is. I thought
I went. The Die
yeah.
Another Day one. Me saying this now is the best of the four. The pre-credit sequence.
Agree. It's like the only part of the
phenomenal.
Film I like.
Phenomenal. We'll get to eventually. But yeah, the chase of. I mean, talking with Em and Roebuck, this happens more in the Brosnan era, so you get more of these not supporting characters, but they're like government characters that. If you look at the history of the franchise, right, it's always been, M, Q, or Moneypenny coming to the field or chatting to them. You never get the interactions with the other things. And sort of what we said, License to Kill and Goldeneye, was that, you reach this point where we're just sick and fed up of Felix Leiter, that he's been recast so many times you don't care. And he had his film in License to Kill. That was his film. That was the moment for him to have a bigger role until Casino Royale. And now it's like we need to have you can have other allies. And it's what they've done more in this era. Having a boardroom. I always forget the name of the character Colin Salmon plays. He pops up and he's in the next few films.
Robinson.
And that's it, Robinson. And it's just world building, which is what we kept saying, that there are other people other than the MI6 that are involved. And yes, it's very political and it's not very Bond-esque, but I think the big thing with this is where you take the M conversation from last week where she's just calling him a misogynistic dinosaur. But she had that respect for him. Whereas in this one, this is very much her. Sorry, I was on Nicola's comment. This is very much her. She, looking at a film ago to now, this is her guy, and she knows he's going to deliver. And I just love the fact that the two of them have this mutual relationship. And obviously, when we get to Wild, it's not enough when they kickstart M into the story a lot more. It's just phenomenal. And I think once again, Judi Dench so much is the best ever to it.
Yeah, there's some really nice moments with that as well, where she's like, "What's he doing?" And she's like, "His job." And when he makes it out of there alive, there's this smile on her face. So she cares about him. She's got to sort of rule the roost with an iron fist a little bit, but she does care about him, and I really like that dynamic that she brings in this.
I actually quite like the kind of whole dynamic of having almost an overbearing person who doesn't really know what they're doing, kind of wading into the situation, especially with the secret agents. And like you said, the formula did kind of need to change because there was no change in between. There was no internal politics or internal kind of mutterings and stuff like that over the mission until some of the later films. So it's nice to have kind of a character like Roebuck who kind of comes in and is a bit kind of not buffoon-like, but wants to impose his own agenda onto kind of Bond's missions or any of the 00 missions. And you have like Judi Dench kind of biting back, as that is kind of what her character does best. Those kind of backhanded compliments and stuff like that. Those kind of straight back at you, no nonsense, I'm in charge here kind of moments, and that's perfectly highlighted by a character who goes against that. So I actually quite like the inclusion of anything that could throw into the mix that could also make the mission more difficult. Because if it's just, Bond's on another mission, he's got the entire support from the British government, he has his entire team behind him, and it's all good. If he's being strangled by, so we say, someone releasing a missile at him, one of his own people who's kind of going, nope, we're launching it and we can't cancel it and stuff like that, then it adds a bit more drama to it. So it adds kind of the stakes going up.
Absolutely. I think we should talk about the man himself right now. Pierce Brosnan again. So obviously his second outing as Bond in this one too. A lot of people in the comments and just from comments that I've read online as well in the interim since we did Goldeneye have mentioned that Pierce Brosnan feels like an amalgamation of different Bonds. He kind of struggles to find his own identity of the character, and maybe that's kind of the restrictive nature of the studios, the producers, the writers, or whatever. He's kind of got the action style of Connery. He's got the quippiness of Roger Moore. And that's kind of where it begins and ends with the character. I'd also throw like another Bond in the mix with this one. And I do think that, especially with the first act, I mentioned in the tail end of it, he kind of turns into like a generic sort of like action hero, which he does very well. And you buy him as the action lead. And, he's fantastic in that regard. So I do love that stuff still. But I feel like he got to sink his teeth into the role a little bit more with this one in that first opening couple of acts as Bond. He's in the tux again. He's got car chases, he's wooing the Bond girls, but I'd add a dash of Dalton in this one. I think we see like a slightly darker side to his character, especially at the beginning. There's kind of the Tracy moment where the Bond girl dies and he's sort of like cradling her in his arms and he kisses her before he's got to take off on his mission. There's the moment with Dr. Kaufman. I don't want to talk too much about Kaufman because I know that we're going to talk about him later. It's just I'm absolutely resisting trying to do it, but it's the one-liner where he says, wait, I'm just a professional trying to do a job. And he's like, me too. And then he just shoots him in the head. That's a Dalton moment right there. That is a really dark Bond moment. And I like that Brosnan gets the chance to sort of flesh out the role a little bit now. Goldeneye was very quippy. And obviously you had the action scenes as well. But this one felt there were more levels to the character, at least in those first couple of acts, I think.
Yeah, I think by this point in time that, he is definitively Bond, right? The first film worked out for him. And it was like, we just need to build off this. And it's really interesting because I've seen a lot of lines that, I've always thought, he's like Connery and more. But the one thing that Brosnan brings to it, and I feel this is very nice. He sort of laughed at the beach scene from Goldeneye. And it's just him sort of sat there contemplating. And it's like, this is really weird. In this film, they go more for that emotional side of Bond, which is where sort of Paris comes into it, which, we'll get to Terry Hatcher in a bit. But the fact that once again you've got the world building that there was a Bond girl that had a life before she met him, that they were a relationship. Obviously, she'd be able to get with the media mogul, and how is probably the other question to that. But he brings something to where I see him as an action hero. Like I think he's got the biggest body count of every Bond actor in terms of how many people they've killed across their films. And he's like I wouldn't say Dalton's a one-man warpath and license to kill. He's smart. He gets Sanchez to do all the killing for him essentially. But with Dalton, he goes into a scene of machine guns. He's going to come out, and that is like James Bond. Him walk into a room knowing he can kill them. But this guy's going to sort of laugh about it afterwards, or laugh whilst he's doing it. And he just has this confidence, and I think that's what you want from Bond. And it's really harsh to compare us to Craig. I think Daniel Craig is a very not nervous actor, but you look at Quantum of Solace. When we'll get to it properly, we'll do it properly, but he still feels very new to the role. And that's only 2 years. It's the same window as this film as well. And, we said Roger Moore, it took him 3 films. Obviously, Dalton, done it in 2. Brosnan, that second film, he's more confident. Connery has it from the get-go, and he's got the first 3, which are his best ones by a mile off. And it's really interesting with Brosnan's approach that he feels at home. And I think that would have been down to how Goldeneye was received, how that would have thrown him into the limelight. I know he was doing films in between Goldeneye and this as well, but he was one of the actors where I think he rose to the occasion. And the other thing we haven't discussed a lot as well is that he loves the character of Bond. That you always look at, we always look at Mark Hamill with Star Wars, like he embroids that franchise like he is like a steward to it as well. And Pierce Brosnan, and he always says, I grew up watching these films as a kid. I grew up with Moore, I grew up with Connery. And he said that, he getting that role for him was massive, and he didn't want to leave, and he's never hid that ever. He never wanted to leave playing the role of Bond. And obviously, I think Dalton and Craig are very different in that sense. Connery went off it right away. Moore kind of played it as a job, so it's a really fascinating one with his approach to it. But I think his relationship with, I'd say, Barbara Broccoli and Michael G. Wilson are what sort of cements it. That ultimately he is the guy they always wanted. And I think he cherishes that, and he puts his best into it. And he just seems, any interview you see him, he's just the kind of guy that he just goes in for everything. That he outside of the film, and this is really off topic now, but he like does a lot of environmental stuff. That he seems like someone that genuinely cares about what he does. And I think that shows us that he respects that franchise to the point of he's going to go out and do his all to try and impress everyone. And I think he does it again.
I think you're right in saying that he's settled a little bit more into this film. And I'm wondering, thinking back, because Goldeneye was very quippy and had those kind of quite almost comedic moments thrown in and stuff like that. However, one of the moments that stood out for me was the for England, James, no, for me, which is a cold line to say when you're dropping someone to their death, basically. And I'm wondering if they kind of saw that as people like it when he says something quite dark and when he's being kind of quite a cold kind of killing line and stuff like that. Instead of going for the quippy nature, should we make this film darker and add in more of those lines as well? Like you said with Dr. Kaufman's kind of death, that kind of line being brought in. to this film. I'm wondering if that was kind of spawned off that, of people quite liking that delivery from the previous film and wanting, okay, maybe we do go a bit darker, to kind of shy away from the quips, because this film wasn't as quickly. I think you said it straight away, Chris, that there isn't many one-liners in this film. There are
There's a few.
but
Not as many, maybe.
Not directly from Bond. I think they decided
Yeah.
that, okay, this is going to be a bit more of a darker film. Like you said, George, they had that Tracy moment of him kind of having to deal with a loss and kind of move on and get on with it and stuff like that. So, yeah, I liked his performance in the film. I think the dark tone does suit him, but I would like to see kind of a nicer balance. I think we get that in the next film, at least, along. But no, it feels like a more settled Bond film. And yeah, he does seem like the right fit for it. And at the time, like when kind of watching the films, you can tell at this point he is Bond. It's not like still not sure, maybe another film's needed. You're like, no, that is James Bond, and you can completely believe the character.
I think it's just the right amount of darkness as well. I don't think they needed to go overboard with it, and I think if they did, I think that would take away from what Brosnan's Bond is. I think that would have been too jarring. I think it would have been like I'm going to piss off a lot of people in the comments again right now, and I love it. It'd be like when you had Roger Moore doing For Your Eyes Only, which we had a problem with when they've cemented what kind of Bond they are, and then you flip it on its and it's like, no, let's go completely dark with this character now and serious, and that's not what we come to expect from that Bond. So if he just showed up in this one and he was like cold-blooded killer and just, stoic face, that wouldn't have worked. I think, but I like that they added just a dash of it in there, and I think that's all he needs. It just kind of, it just feels like a more well-rounded character, as you mentioned in this one. And I think that also goes for the supporting characters and the interactions that he has as well. Nikolai mentions here as well, I like Moneypenny much better here than in Goldeneye. Her scenes with James feel much more charming here. She also has one of the best one-liners in the film. She does, which is why I'm not going to bring it up right now, because I need some ammunition for the section when we talk about our favorite one-liners. But I do agree, it felt... In hindsight, the one in Goldeneye did feel a bit awkward. Some people even said creepy, just the kind of whispery delivery that, he shared with her in that film in the elevator. And it didn't feel quite like the same level of chemistry that you'd get with like a Lois Maxwell, for example, in that role. But I'm not head over heels for this Moneypenny even still after watching her in this film, but I do think it was a slightly better scene and a bit more of a believable back and forth between the two. But one of the dynamics that I did love and loved in the previous movie, love it even more in this one, is the ever great Desmond Llewellyn as Q. I love their dynamic in this one, and I think people have mentioned that it feels more like it's almost like a father-son dynamic kind of thing, or maybe like a grandfather kind of dynamic, and he's like, grow up, 007 and all that. So I love it. I've always loved that stuff, but especially with Brosnan, it just feels nice. I think you started to get that a bit with Dalton, but I think definitely with Brosnan, it's like a match made in heaven between the two of them. And the gadgets in this film are fantastic as well. All of them actually get a payoff this time around, which is very nice. There's no random car that's introduced that never comes into it in the film. And it's just great. And like George, you've mentioned as we've been going through these films, as they get more modern, especially now we're in the 90s, you'll see gadgets that are just like an everyday thing now. It's like a car that talks to you. It's like, it's Siri, it's GPS. It's like everything you come to expect. Cars that you can just, driverless cars, which are a thing, not widespread, but and also in this one as well, a big thing is that we get a new weapon for Bond as well. The Voltha, I think it's the P99, I think it is. Yeah. Which was his new gun. I think that Voltha wanted to sort of market, Bond's always been like a marketing tool, whether it's vehicles or, designers or whatever it happens to be. They wanted to showcase their new weapon, and he gets it in this. But I think he actually has this through to Quantum of Solace. So, I mean, that's a pretty big deal for the image of Bond. But I like that it's still the Voltha pistol, and it's more up to date, and it's kind of what the 90s Bond is. It's like the same that you remember, but it's more updated, it's more glossy and everything like that. So loved his dynamics with all the supporting characters in this one. I guess we'll get on to the one ally who kind of shows up again in just a second, but even with that, it's just brilliant.
Yeah, I mean, by the ally, I think we mean Jack Wade, who is one of the more interesting characters. I think we can put as an understatement that you look at his journey on our videos, from us despising him in The Living Daylights to, obviously, it wasn't Jack Wade, and it's just the same actor, but we loved him in Goldeneye. And again, it's the Brosnan era is so good at bringing in recurring characters that it's that world building dynamic that you can move over. It's like you can have other people. There are other people in this world, and the bits that I love with him is that he reminds me of Sheriff Pepper, right?
Yeah,
but one you can tolerate.
Mhm.
And
I smiled when he showed up again in this film. I
well,
didn't
this is it, and
expect it. It was great.
it's one of my favorite bits is when they're talking about Vietnam, and obviously, it's so funny because we know what the Americans like, but is he wearing anything where they'd realize that he's wearing like oh no, just like the American everything. It's just like a great one, but he's already jumped out, and I love how he is with Brosnan, and it just being able to have new characters, it just makes such a massive difference to the story, and even if it's for one scene, it just brings that connective tissue back to Goldeneye, and it makes it feel like an era. But you speak about the two Dalton films, and I think you always call it a blip, which is the best term for it because it came and went, and you got two different Felix Leiters in two films, and it's like not the fact it's not continuity, but you question what came before, whereas because this is having connective tissue to what was before in a lot of things, and bringing in new people who we're going to come back to at some point, I think that makes a massive difference. What you want from an ally, and even looking at the Craig era, Jeffrey Wright coming back in, and we know he's going to be No Time to Die, who I'm all here for because it makes place in the story for him to come back to. It's those kind of things that I think help these films stand out by the eras. And Jack Wade, he's very likable at this point, and it's not a spoiler, Chris, but he doesn't come back after this, so I don't want to get you excited about a Hawaiian shirt coming up. But you do get some other people though that will return, and some new faces that you'll be shocked appeared in a James Bond film.
However, for the two films that he played the character of Jack Wade in, at least, I really liked his character. I wouldn't even put it in the same category as Sheriff Pepper, because that is just it's
like a good version of Sheriff
character.
I know,
character type thing.
I know, but still, the on-screen chemistry that he had with Brosnan was fantastic, and as a character who kind of started off, shall we say, on the wrong foot with him, or in a joking way on the wrong foot. He kind of just comes through as just a likable guy in the end, just one who can help him out in the situation and stuff like that. I would have actually liked to have seen more of him in the films across, but I'm not sure why he didn't come back. Is there any reason we know? Or
I don't know yet. I'll have a read into it, but it would have made sense for maybe if they were going to do it, it would have been Die Another Day. I think that's probably the only way I can say that in terms of the American influence.
Yes.
We even said about Sergeant Pepper, though, if he'd have come back in A View to a Kill as that one who goes to arrest Bond, we'd have been fine with it. It's sort of come full circle at that point, I think. I would have reached acceptance. It's like the Jar Jar Binks effect. You probably hate... Well, I didn't hate him. I was a kid, but you hate him, but you kind of come around to him in the end. It just takes a few years. Let's talk about the Bond girls in this thing. So we kind of have two. So we'll start with Paris Carver.
Should we pull up the hot take in the comments first?
Let's pull up the hot take.
I agree with this. I
completely agree with this as well.
Brosnan has more chemistry with a dead Paris, aka Tayte, in this while she's live in the film. Missed opportunity. So, I have never seen. Is it Desperate Housewife? She's famous for, isn't it?
And Lois and Clark as well. She played Lois Lane. Yeah.
Now, I've never seen her in anything else but these, so my knowledge of her is terrible. What I do know is that she was 3 months pregnant when they started filming this, and they had to move the schedule around to accommodate it. And I think this is one of the minor issues of the film, not that she's pregnant, but she's essentially in 2 scenes, and it feels like a character that could have been around a lot longer. Obviously, you understand completely why they changed the schedule, but, the whole... I mean, it's not really a nightclub, is it? The TV announcement night. What would you call it? When he turns off the
first broadcast.
Yeah, their scene feels like that should have been 3 or 4 different scenes in different locations, but it all happened on night 1. I mean, the film takes place over 2 days? Do they say 48 hours or something insane? But
yeah,
Terry Hatcher and him do not have good chemistry, and I know that he hadn't been told she was pregnant on set, so he famously had a go at her for turning up late to filming, which I think is one of those behind the scenes well-known stories. And when he found out, obviously, he apologized. He was good. He felt bad and stuff, but there's no chemistry. And I'm gonna say it. I think she's a dreadful character. I don't care. I don't mind him having an ex-girlfriend. I love that concept. It's he just happens to be with the spy, and then you just happen to end up with probably the richest man in the world at the time. It'd be like if Jeff Bezos' ex was a spy. You'd be like, yeah, he'd have known that anyway. I don't know. I don't know if I'm looking at it too cold, but I'm not a fan of Paris Carver, and I feel nothing. I like the death scene because you get a great videotape thing with the whole playing the news early. I love that. but I couldn't care less about her character, and it gave birth to Dr. Kaufman. So I guess really it's a positive.
I completely agree with you. Her character is forgettable. In fact, if there wasn't that kind of good scene that came with her being dead, it would have been just like that was a character in the film, which is really bad to say about that. But I don't know if it's down to the acting. I don't know if it's down to the writing. I don't know if it's down to just the character that they've created. But it just seems like not like a character that Bond would, dare I say, go for. It's just like, it's a bit odd. I wasn't a fan at all. And honestly, I'm kind of glad that she only got like really one scene alive, one scene dead. That was okay. It gave him a bit of motivation. The way to improve the character is obviously to give her a bit more backstory and actually make us feel for her death. But given the way the character is presented in the film, I don't even see it as motivation. I think it's more of kind of like, oh no, I'm now in a new situation. I've got to deal with Dr. Kaufman and stuff like that. But whatever. There is a better girl in this film, shall we say?
Yes. So Nikolai's commented here, I don't know how true this is, but it's quite interesting if it is. It's been put out there that the original plan was to bring Pam Bouvier back as Carver's wife. That could be a hot take. I don't know if that's true or not, but that would be pretty cool.
That is true. That would have been very good, actually.
But
I'm not a fan of that.
No, yeah, just leave it.
New era.
Yeah, exactly. I agree. But ones that were confirmed to originally play the Bond girl, you had Stella Ward, who was originally auditioned for the role, but was told that they would have gone with her if she was 10 years younger, which is swing and a miss there. They also wanted, very interestingly, I think, George, you may have mentioned this at the start, Monica Bellucci, who obviously would go on to play a Bond girl eventually in Spectre.
And get even less scenes than this one.
Yes, exactly, yes. Very similar character. I was reminded of her character pretty much instantly, actually, watching this one. I am outnumbered on this one, because I actually really liked her character. Now, as soon as you're introduced to her being the wife of the main villain, you know she's lined up for the meat grinder. You know that she's going to be that Bond girl that gets off pretty much towards the beginning. But I disagree, Tate. I think she gets, for the role that the character serves in the film, and she's really just a character that kind of serves to instill the threat of the villain and the whole gimmick of him predicting the day after's news and executing the horrible act, the previous day. Just goes to show that again as well. I thought they get plenty of backstory for the two of them, and I think I actually don't mind their chemistry. Maybe if I watch it again now with your guys' opinions in mind, I'll be looking out for it more. But on a first watch, I thought they were great together. I like that. And maybe if they didn't like each other on set, that kind of adds to the performance a little bit as well, because she is like a jaded lover and there is meant to be a bit of animosity there between the two at the beginning. I love when the guy comes up to take their drinks order and she's like, oh, and Mr. Bond will have dry martini, shaken not stirred, a vodka martini, shaken not stirred, and he's like, and you'll have a tequila, and she's like, no, I won't. I'm going to have some of my husband's own champagne. I thought that was great, and it shows that she is like the jaded lover thing. I think the soundtrack probably helped sell me as well, because some of the music in like their love scenes is just absolutely gorgeous, like up there with some of like the best romance themes for me in the Bond franchise. And then, she's very unceremoniously killed off at that point by the one and only character that we'll talk about later when we get to the villains. We're going to keep teasing his character. But no, I didn't have a problem with her at all. And I think that her function of a character fit well. I thought you got just the right amount of backstory there. And she is basically just the trophy wife of Carver, isn't she? That's essentially all she is, like jaded lover, can't get with Bond, so I'm going to, pretend that I'm doing better for myself. And she's in a completely loveless marriage with this guy, just like absolutely. And obviously it just takes Bond to come back and pump her for some information, which he does. And, it's a match made in heaven. So I don't have a problem with her character. And I think you two are being very, very negative towards her, because I don't think she's that bad. She's not up there with like a Tiffany or whatever, she just kind of fits into the role of and I actually go against the grain here. I wouldn't have minded if she was the main Bond girl in this film. I'm going to go that far. Now I do love Michelle Yeoh, but I don't know if she could have like handled the action scenes maybe, but she kind of fits into that role for me of the one from Man with a Golden Gun, and the one who's at the beginning of Moonraker, who feels quite interesting and you want to know more about their character. It's usually if they have some kind of ties to the villain. You had the one who was, she like the mistress, I think, of Scaramanga, wasn't she? And Man with a Golden Gun, and then she's killed. And then the one in Moonraker, she helps Bond at the mansion at the beginning, and then she's killed straight away. But they're always characters you kind of want to know more about, and I like that. When they have that tie to the villain and they have that dynamic, I think that's really interesting, and it's always something I want to see developed more. But I didn't have a problem with the guys, so I can't agree with you there, I'm afraid.
What I think the best bit about her is that, and this is something, again, the Bond films haven't really done till now, they existed before we met her for the very first time. And I think little things like that just create this world that they've lived in, that it was an old girlfriend. And you do get that really cheesy line when she's like, what did she like? Just tell me, like, did you like me too much? It was something really weird like that.
Yeah, he's got it here. Did I get too close, James?
Yeah, and then he, like, a couple minutes later, his, like, goes, like, full Northern Irish accent, like, you did get too close or something really weird. I don't know. I just wasn't sold on them. But I did like the whole, they had a history before, not after. And again, it's the... it's that classic Bond line. How many people, I can't remember what Bond film they're saying, but pretty much everyone that ends up meeting him pretty much ends up dead, which is how it always goes. Sean Bean said it in the last one, of course he did. I think other Bond villains have said it, but yeah, I don't know that. One thing I will say, it's not really funny, but this is more about Elliot Carver. The fact that he's trying to get on Wei Lin with his wife standing there, and like he's offering her jobs, and he's going to like set up a company. Like your wife is right there. But then again, he's just that kind of like villain, isn't he?
It's a really awkward conversation between them all, isn't it? Like they're all stood there together, and it's just like, oh, this is awkward. Like, just like move away and mingle with someone else. But yeah. And you mentioned there, sorry, Nikolai mentioned about that line, like, did I get too close, James? It is kind of cheesy, I suppose, but I just like chalked it up to you might get that in a Roger Moore film. It's the kind of romanticized, sweeping strings in the background. Like, did I get too close, James? Yeah, it's fine. You have that with Craig as well in Casino Royale. He says like, you stripped my armor from me or something. I know he has a line about that when he's talking about Vesper. It has its cheesy moments. It's fine. It's all part of it.
I just don't think it suited kind of the film's tone that they've been setting up until that point to have like that kind of dialogue and stuff like that. The gun under the pillow stuff, absolutely, that would have like fitted in and everything like that. But no, you've mentioned Michelle Yeoh already. No, I don't think Terry Hatcher would have been able to do.
Probably not. Probably not. Probably not. You're probably right.
Especially Chris, if she was pregnant at the time.
Yes,
I feel like that would have been a bit of a challenge.
Yeah,
Scarlett Johansson though did it for Age of Ultron. And that does always make me think of that.
Good point. It's a good point. But anyway, let's talk about Michelle Yeoh then.
Yes.
Let's talk about her. Colonel Wei Lin. I did not know that Michelle Yeoh was in this film. So again, opening title sequence. When I saw her name, I was like, oh, this is going to be a good one. I love Michelle Yeoh. Fantastic martial arts actress. I must admit, I think one of the only things I've seen her in is Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon. She's done some voice work in Kung Fu Panda, and I've seen her in some other stuff as well. But she's a tremendous actress. I think she's been voted as like one of the best action heroines, and you see her in this film, and by God, you believe it. And I put this on the socials earlier. I like that they were able to bring in some of those martial arts elements that the actress has in real life into the role of the character. The actual character, though, I think lacks personality. There's something missing from her character. She can handle the action scenes. You believe her in the action scenes. She's fantastic. She can hold her own, whether it's guns, martial arts, whatever it is. She absolutely nails it. The stuff on the bike and the stunts. I know she actually wanted to do a lot of her own stunts, but they were like, nah, because if something goes wrong, we're not dealing with that whole thing. So they did get stunt people in. But I appreciate that she wanted to get stuck in and do some of that stuff, which is great. It's just... And I think this is probably why I'm saying that I prefer Terry Hatcher, because there was a history there with the characters and there was intrigue there and like the jaded lover kind of thing. Whereas Wei Lin, she's, skilled Chinese spy that goes up against Bond and help kind of on the same mission and helping him out with it. But there's not really many scenes with them together where you kind of get a sense of what her character is or any kind of back and forth. They're just kind of there to do the action and to do the action well. And it doesn't really go beyond that. So I don't know whether I'd rank her highly as like one of the best Bond girls. I think she fits this film very well, and as I mentioned, she does the action fantastically, but it doesn't really go beyond that. One thing that did kind of it was kind of weird, I guess. It didn't feel 90s at all. It's the bit where she's like scaling down the wall and she's in this kind of like 60s, like Liz Hurley from Austin Powers International Man of Mystery jumpsuit.
Is it really bad? I immediately thought, oh my God, that's just like straight out of Austin Powers. That's
yeah, it is.
Austin Powers film.
I think it's Elizabeth Hurley's mom at the very opening scene of International Man of Mystery. We'll find out in a couple of months' time. I swear to God, she wears something almost identical to this. So it feels very 60s. It felt very out of place. So I don't know. I wanted to bring that up, but she's fine. As I mentioned, Michelle Yeoh, fantastic actress. She does it well, but there's just something missing, and I can't quite put my finger on it.
No, you're I think you're bang on. I think when you think of Natalia, the bits that we spoke about really well last week was that she had a story before we met her. Before Bond meets her, he meets her in the helicopter, and we've had 4 or 5 big scenes with her already. Michelle Yeoh kind of comes and goes. And she's this enigmatic character that, she's a journalist or she's this and she's popping here and there. I think if we'd have had some scenes of her before she met Bond or just scenes of her by herself at some points in the film, I think it would have helped massively because we don't really get a purpose of what she's there for other than being sort of like badass. That, we get that scene of them at like I'm going to call it like the Chinese version of Q's Workshop, right? When they got like the people coming in and all the, him playing with all the stuff. And there just doesn't feel as if it feels like they've approached this character like we've literally got Michelle Yeoh. Let's get some. I think they flew in like Hong Kong stunts team that she'd worked with before, so she helps get that organised. She's done a lot of stuff for the action, and I just don't think they've got that character nailed down on paper yet. I just don't think we have enough of her, And as well, it makes it really weird is when he gets in and she gets kidnapped. That's like one of the Bond characters you'd assume wouldn't get kidnapped because she's actually capable. Whereas in this one, it feels very forced, and the romance angle doesn't work as well. I'm always going to talk about Quantum of Solace, where one of the best things they did was not make Olga Kurylenko an outright Bond girl, where they never got together, any of that stuff. And, it's something in these eras when the Bond had to get the Bond girl at the end. It was always the way until Casino Royale Quantum of Solace. So I think it's one where they were just missing that not extra rewrite, but they were just missing some key scenes with her to establish herself away from Bond. But I do say that I love that scene when she's climbing up the wall, only because she does this really like innocent wave at Bond, and he kind of like smiles back. I'm trying to remember, like he does like his smile at her, but I absolutely love their dynamic with each other, and the action scenes are great. The whole motorbike and on the handcuff thing as well is just phenomenal. But I think you're missing something. I think she's one of those Bond actresses where it very rarely happens where they get the right actress in and don't use her properly. I think they use her properly, but they just don't give her the character to get the use as well.
Yeah, Nikolai mentions it there as well, just real quick. Yeah. Michelle Yeoh is great. Waylon, not so much. She's very charming and badass, but her character is literally just badass. Aside from that, her character is non-existent. Absolutely. I think you hit the nail on the head there.
I was going to say, I was going to absolutely just echo those words. Like, it's almost like with the rush production, the rush writing and stuff like that. They were like, we've got Michelle Yeoh. Just make her do action scenes, and that's just not write a character and have her as this just kind of person who can do the action scenes. And then they didn't even let her do some of the stunts of the action scenes, which would have been personal to her. It feels like a character that's thrown in almost last minute. Like, we need another Bond girl because we're killing one off. Who do we get in? Let's get in someone badass and have them as the badass character of the film to play off against Bond. And there's nothing past that. Even to the point where, like you were saying, her getting kind of kidnapped at the end, it's like she's not a character who would be kidnapped. She's resourceful. She has like really good martial arts skills. She's handy with a weapon. Yes, you don't expect her to be the one getting kidnapped. In fact, it's almost as if in this film's dynamics, Bond would actually have been better suited to have been kidnapped and her rescuing him and then trying to figure it out between them. It's an unusual one. I think they just had no idea what to do with the character and what to do with Michelle Yeoh, because you could have thrown anyone into that role if the stunts team were going to do all the stunts for her instead. I know she did some of it, but for a lot of it, it's like, what's the point? It's like bringing in a person who is trained to do all of this and has the acting talent and has everything to go with it, and then going, we're going to give the role to someone else. It's just an odd decision. I just don't get it.
I think some of the pacing's quite awkward around the second act with her as well, which kind of goes to that as well. It's right after the helicopter chase in the town sequence, which is fantastic sequence, by the way. One of the best action beats, I think, out of all the James Bond films that I've seen. Absolutely loved it. And after that, it's the action dies down. We've just had this massive action set piece. You need to let the film breathe a little bit, and this is where we could have had that time to develop hers and James's character and get to know each other a little bit more. And it's where they're showering together, and then she handcuffs him dead man's chest style to the thing and says, like, I work alone, I'm going to go ahead. And the very next scene, it's like another fight scene, like another martial arts scene, and then Bond just rejoins her again, and the two are back together and they carry on. So her handcuff, it just felt like a completely pointless scene. It's like, if you were going to separate these characters to then just rejoin them again in the very next scene, I'm talking like minutes of screen time here, it just felt really awkward to me. So maybe they could have handled it where, if you did want scenes with her alone and to sort of like dial her up a bit more, handcuff James there, she goes on ahead Leroy Jenkins style straight into the thick of it and then gets kidnapped that way, if they were going to have like a kidnapping thing. But maybe that would have shifted the focus too much away from Bond. It's just a little bit awkward. And Nikolai mentions here as well, I also have a problem with how they edited her fight scenes. I adore Chinese martial arts cinema, and you can just tell that the crew on this one didn't know how to get them to their full potential. I'll agree with that. If you watch any of the sort of was it the Wuxia? Is that what it's called? I can't remember. Yeah. Like the martial art films that I've talked about, Hero, Crouching Tiger, House of Flying Daggers, all that stuff. That is how you showcase that kind of action. I know that's kind of dialed up more, but even stuff you see now with John Wick or The Raid or something like that, there's a certain way to film these kind of action scenes. Even in the 90s, you had stuff. The Matrix came out 2 years after this, and the action scenes in that one. So I'll agree with that. And he mentions hooking up with her at the end. Yeah, it didn't feel like they were on that level. It felt like they were more like colleagues. And there's a Bond film there's probably a lot of Bond films that end like this. I think pretty much every single Connery or Moore film ended like this, didn't it? Usually with Q listening in and then the two of them. But there's one specifically where it's, oh, James, we're about to be rescued. Oh, we've got a few more minutes. And does he like throw a parachute over them or something? I think that might be Goldfinger or Thunderball, maybe. I'm not sure. It felt quite early on. But that being sort of like left cast adrift at sea, waiting for rescue and hooking up, whether in like a little rubber dinghy or whatever they are, felt very akin to that. And it's fine as a homage, but I just never saw Michelle Yeoh and Pierce Brosnan have that kind of connection with each other. It just felt like they were both in on a mission together, but they didn't need to get together at the end of the film.
Yeah, it reminds me of For Your Eyes Only, when he gets with her and it's like the least like there's been any theme for you two to get together for the entire film. It's that one. Mm-hmm. So I think it's very similar to that for me. But is it worth talking about the villains? Is it time?
Yes,
to talk?
It is time. It is time.
Sir Jonathan Pryce, as of the 2021 Honours List, which I want to mention, one of the two popes, the other pope being Anthony Hopkins, who they originally touted to play... I can't imagine Anthony Hopkins being called Elliot Carver, but
and in Goldeneye as well, they wanted him for that as well, didn't they? As far back as then.
I think Elliot Carver. I'm going to take aside the real life stuff out of this right now. I think he is one of the most underrated Bond villains, and when I say underrated, I mean he is actually a top tier Bond villain, but he's never in the conversation. I think he is phenomenal. I absolutely love him. He invented the iPad before Apple. He's doing the whole 90s typing thing. He's a raging psychopath. And the best thing about him is he is so pathetic as a villain. And that's what makes... those pathetic villains that are so good because they're so ridiculous.
It's why he hires the muscle. Like, he ain't going to do the fight himself. And the best bit is his, like, I know it's really random off point, nothing Stephen, but there's like a guard that's not watching the CCTV. And he's like, what do I pay you for? And it's like, that's when you know that you've got a boss no one cares about. But Jonathan Pryce, Elliot Carver, incredible. And that's, again, before the context of how real that really is, that character.
I wouldn't say he was underrated. I thought he was quite well kind of held up. I know he isn't in the kind of upper echelons like you'd name like a Goldfinger or something like that. And I think one of the things that goes against him is definitely the villain's name, because Elliot Carver isn't exactly a villain's name you're likely to remember.
Better what it could have been.
What was it going to be?
Oh, there was a horrible... there's like 60s Bond films where the villains are puns.
Yes.
Where is it? Where's the name?
Come on.
Bring up... You guys keep talking. I'm going to go bring the script up.
Go on,
I think that's kind of part of the character's downfall. I do also think that it's... I don't know. It's quite an over-the-top performance, which I quite like. But at the same time, like you said, he's a boss who no one really cares about. And therefore, I feel like there's never any kind of no ruthlessness behind him and stuff like that. And it just kind of seems to fall flat in that department, if that's the case. Like, I want a Bond villain that is commanding, even if they're quiet. And maybe this role would have been done better if he wasn't so kind of outlandish, but more of the kind of quiet work from the shadows type that hires in the muscle, that has the people in and stuff like that. Because I feel like Jonathan Pryce could have easily done that as a character role. But no, it's interesting. There are also some things which I'm sure we'll go into it with his whole weird, should we say, kung fu dancing scene, which feels so out of place for the character. Oh no, my God.
It's great.
I know he's unhinged, but we've discussed this beforehand. How on earth? I'm wondering if he got a pay rise just for that scene, just so that he was able to do it.
This is really... Oh, go on. Sorry, George. You got it.
It would, and this is terrible.
Oh, come on.
He would have been called Elliot Harm's Way.
Oh, yes. Yes.
Because obviously Harm's coming that way with the whole news thing. And that is in the...
That would have been amazing.
That was his name in the script. So that would have been something that I think they changed last minute. I can't imagine Jonathan Pryce be going and saying, I'm Elliot Harm's Way, the villain, and that predicts the news. And Carver's just got a kind of like, it's just a British media mogul name. Elliot Carver is the kind of name you would expect, but yeah, Elliot Harm's Way, I'm glad that didn't happen. That would have been awful. Not awful, that just would have been too much, I think. That's like a Roger Moore type thing, isn't it?
I would have been okay with the completely over the top performance if that was his name. I feel like that would have worked.
Reminds me of Red Letter Media when he's like, Doctor, I'm a bad guy, an Admiral Bone to pick. Like, it's just, that's amazing. I would have loved that. But I love schlocky shit like that. So that would be amazing to me. I think Nikolai kind of sides more with you on Mutate on this one. He says, I think Elliot Carver is too silly. I love the idea of him, but he comes across as more of a caricature of a media mogul than an actual psychopathic media billionaires. Felt like a weaker Hugo Drax to me. I do agree with the Hugo Drax thing. I do see the parallel there between the two. But I'm with George on this one. This is top tier Bond villain right here. As good as they come for me. And he's never in the conversation, You've got your Blofelds and your Silvers and your Le Chiffres and everyone in between. And I've never heard Elliot Carver mentioned. Maybe if he did have that name, he would be more in the discussion. It'd be more memorable that way. But it's what we talked about. And I think Tom mentioned this from A to Z podcast. I think when we were talking about The Spy Who Loved Me, we're talking about Stromberg as a villain. And we're saying that, the motivation's great, the environments are great, and what he has to do is a great Bond motive, but him as a villain isn't memorable because he's not like camp enough. He doesn't sort of like play into it as much. And then obviously when you get Hugo Drax, he does all of those things, and Hugo Drax is a really memorable Bond villain. If they'd have gone with more of a sinister, realistic, akin to maybe like a Daniel Craig villain with this one, it would have been great. And, Jonathan Pryce could have done it, but I don't think it would have fit the tone for this film.
Yes.
And I think with the Brosnan films, they are better when they do have that dash of campiness still. It does feel like a kind of carryover from the Roger Moore stuff, but not as much of that, and it feels more modernized. They're entertaining, fun action films, and I think you need that dash of silliness in there. But I still think he gets his like sinister moments. I think he's built up really well from the first scene. The bit where he's editing the headlines on the big screens and he's in the darkly lit room and it's the close-up of the eyes and he's like, delicious, like all that stuff. Such a great build-up, and I just love the concept of the character, the conceit of that he's planning the tomorrow's news today, and he's going to do all these horrible things, creating World War III, not because he's got some kind of animosity against another country. He just wants exclusive broadcasting rights for the news in China. That's all he wants. He's just like self. But I absolutely love that. I did want to mention as well, when we were talking about Michelle Yeoh and Bond, but he's just got his face plastered on the side of a skyscraper, you know, and that's so him. He's so egotistical and narcissistic a villain. Also, that scene where they grab the banner and the jump off and it rips down, it reminded me of something. I just remember what it is. It's Rush Hour 2. I think there's a moment in Rush Hour 2 or Rush Hour 3. I can't remember which one that ends very similar where they do something like that. Obviously, that came out after this film. But I think he is tremendous in this film. He gets some amazing one-liners. His persona, he is sinister in some parts, but the silliness kind of worked for me. And when he's, you know, like shouting orders and firing people, it's not just that bit as well. It's where he gets taken off the air and you've got sort of like the PR woman on stage. She's like, "Get out of my sight, you're fired." Like, I love that stuff. He's fantastic with it. I did want to say, and the Stromberg conversation here. We mentioned that Stromberg just kind of gets shot through a tube, doesn't he? And just falls face first into his melon.
Most disappointing
This is how you do a villain's death. And it has a payoff because it's the drill from the opening scene. And it's fantastic. It's one of the grisliest Bond deaths, I think. But
brutal. I
can't say enough positive things about him. Honestly, he's probably my favorite thing in the movie, next to another villain, which we're going to talk about very, very shortly.
Yeah, I'm kind of with you. The death is gnarly, and you know, I don't think anyone's going to get a worse death than Dario, but that's, you know, rated 15, and that's License to Kill. So
yeah,
this is as close as you can get. Because if this was License to Kill, we'd have seen it. That's the difference. And I think you get his screams, which is, you know, what was the criticism of On Top last week? You didn't get like a bone snap, or she just does a Marion Cotillard, just falls asleep. And you know, you get Carver screaming, and I think that's when you know it's been sold. And it's such a great. And I also love the fact the drill is so far away. And it's like a joke, like from like,
Austin Powers with a steamroller, like no, it's ages away.
Like, it's so far away. I love the fact that Brosnan just like leaves him there, and he just gets
move.
It's a great way to go. It's so well done. It suits him, and there's a great one-liner from Brosnan after as well when he does it. But in terms of villains, it's a really interesting conversation to mention, because this is a villain probably perfectly suited to the Craig era, I would say. You can imagine a darker tone Elliot Carver in the Craig films, and it would be phenomenal. Obviously, we've already had it, so we don't want it. But you know, you couldn't take this Carver and put him in Craig, but you could take the essence of the character and do it and modernize it. And I think if he was too dark, brooding, and serious, it wouldn't have worked for this film. And there's just something about it's the thespian in him, isn't it? That he's absolutely loving it. He's so over the top of it. And, you know, we were kind of chatting from live, you know, could Anthony Hopkins have done this? I don't think they would have got that sort of... You know, we see him doing videos on TikTok and stuff now when he's like 80, like dancing around in lockdown, joking he's losing the plot and all this kind of stuff. But I don't think Anthony Daniels... Anthony Daniels would have been a great Elliot Carver.
Yeah, no, you would have actually. Yeah.
Anthony Daniels would make a great Elliot Carver. Think about it, Chris. I've accidentally just got an absolute incredible... He'd have been probably around the same age back then. Anyway, I need to change it. Anthony Hopkins, sorry. I just can't see 1990s Hopkins doing this. That like loose, maybe. You know, it feels like, you know, when you laugh at like De Niro when he started doing this stuff in the sort of mid-noughties, even De Niro wasn't doing stuff in 97. I think Meet the Parents was a couple of years after. So it's a really interesting villain. And I'd imagine it would be one that if they revisited again today, well done. We know the media's been bad for 20, 30 years. The beauty of this film is that, you know, you got to think about it. The concept of this is the 24-hour news and it will all be mine. And they're like, we've had 24-hour news for like 10, 15 years. And again, it's that late 90s thing that this is the way the world is heading, that it's going in a new direction. And, you know, the exclusive rights to Chinese news coverage is bloody great, because we get that with football every week, with companies moaning about who's going to get what tournament and all that stuff. So it's very real. Again, I think that helps him, that the contextually this film is years ahead of itself with his character arc.
I want to bring up a comment from Nikolai again. I actually like the henchman better. Stamper is underrated. He's one of the better tall blonde henchmen. I'll be honest, I normally with Bond henchmen, they are the quiet kind of either non-talking or brooding type, or just the ones in the background. Sometimes you get ones coming through which are a bit more kind of animated. I think one that stands out for me was Benicio Del Toro's one. it's coming from that film. But no, this guy's cocky. Like even from the opening scene, he's like commanding what's going on, and he feels like he has a bit more kind of to say, like than just the normal henchman who is there to kind of do what the Hulk does, smash and nothing else, and just kind of shoot things. He's actually kind of involved with the process and stuff like that. He feels like a kind of a right-hand man to him. So I'm okay with Stamper. I thought he was a character that was somewhat memorable, be it for just his hair alone in the scenes. But other than that, yeah, no, I think he kind of served the role as a henchman quite well.
I think he works as the heavy, and shit, Nikolai, I don't know if you commented this all the way back when we did, it might have been For Your Eyes Only, I can't remember, you said like, oh, just wait for all of the blonde German henchmen. You weren't kidding, because we got another one with this one. He's fine as a heavy. He only gets sort of like one character moment where there's like a little bit of backstory, which that didn't really have a payoff. I know that he gets like stabbed with a few, but I thought he would have like got killed that way or something rather than just getting crushed and then blown up. It's the bit where he talks about that, was it his father or a mentor that was like a father to him that taught him the ancient art of chakra torture? And he's like, his record was 53 hours. I intend to break it. Like, that was a good scene. That was a really fun scene. I wanted to know more about that. I wanted to see some chakra torture in this film. But other than that, he is literally just the big, burly, blonde German henchman guy and nothing more. I don't really have much else to say about him. He works as sort of like the heavy for the end. Sort of like, you've taken out, again, a Bond trope. You've taken out the main villain. But then there's like an altercation with a henchman afterwards, and it works and he's fine. But I don't really have much to say about his character other than that one sort of like really funny scene with the two. There's another guy as well. There's Ricky Jay, who plays Henry Gupta in the film, who's like I think he's the guy that Bond takes hostage at the end, and then Jonathan Pryce just shoots through the heart straight away. Not much to say about him either. So the henchmen are fine in this one. One definitely outshines the rest of them, and yeah, it ain't this guy for right now. I'm going to save my conversation for the henchman for the next guy that we talk about.
Just with Stamper, I mean, it took me ages to realize he's got two coloured eyes, which I guess is the physical trait that many of them have. But he feels like a poor man's Necros from and I didn't like Living Debts as much as I've others did, but I love Necros. But there's something about Stamper that I know he's 6'6" and he's German, and on paper it's like the ideal henchman. And also, when you've got an Elliot Carver, you need somebody that's such an opposite to be the heavy. And what he really reminds me of is a Star Wars character, and it's not one that's been on screen, but you know how like in the Empire, like Darth Vader's just sat in his chamber, and like everyone, all these awful officers are going out doing all the dirty work. And it's like when Stamper's like checking on video, reminds me of like General Viz in the Battle of Hoth. Like he just does the dirty work for him, and that's all it ever is, that Elliot Carver's always hiding away and Stamper's there. But I don't really care for him. And I think the original concept was that he takes pleasure from pain, which is something that Zhenya kind of had in the last film. And without saying anything for next week, I definitely think they take the idea and apply it to somebody in a different manner who's in a bigger role. I'm just going to leave that there. So I think Stampers, they kind of wrote it as like, oh, we've kind of already done this and maybe we can hold back and do it better down the line. So again, that might come down to the writers thing with how tight they were over the deadlines. They couldn't give him another go over. But the actor that played it apparently went into audition and said, I'm 6'6", I'm German, and I'm bad, and that's what got him his audition part. Mm-hmm. And again, if you're being the henchman, go for it, because defining features all come down to, I guess, his mentor, his father figure.
I'm gonna let Chris start with this because I feel like Chris, you've been chomping at the bit to talk about this character.
I have.
So I'll let you go first in this one.
I'm going to go into it now. I do want to bring up that Gupta comment in a second, though, because that's really interesting. I didn't know that about the original idea for the character. But yes, Dr. Kaufman. This is new information to me. I completely missed that part where Dr. Kaufman was the mentor. That makes the character even better. Oh, this guy. Where's the name of the actor? Vincent Schiavelli, I think his name is, who I know as the train driver from Batman Returns. He was like the head of the circus henchman of the Penguin, and he's in that, and he drives the train. If anyone's seen that film, you know what I'm talking about. This character, at first, I was like, which film has he wandered in from? because this felt. Tate, you talked about how silly Jonathan Pryce was. This character shows up.
Yes.
And he's talking with this German accent, yeah. And I'm like, who the hell is this guy? And why is he in my movie? And it was really strange. But then I very quickly came round to his character because I love the silliness in Bond, if it works. And I think that, as I mentioned, the Brosnan ones have the right amount of silly in the film. So I'm fine with this random henchman showing up who's got the most stereotypically over-the-top comedic German accent I've ever heard in a film ever. And he's brilliant. And, you know, he goes through all these old exploits. He's like, I'm very good with this celebrity overdose, yeah. And he's such a fascinating character. I want a film about him. And, you know, he's very elegant. He's very gentlemanly, the way he conducts himself, the way he's dressed. He feels like the henchman equivalent to James Bond. He's very respectful. But then he's like so comedic as well. And you don't buy him as this deadly assassin guy, but you know he is. And apparently if he was the one who did that chakra torture, I mean, this is a despicable human being that is just, you know, he knows pinpoint accuracy. I do have a quote here that he says, and I need to find it. It's not in my one-liners. Here he goes, like, I can shoot you from Stuttgart and still create the proper effect. I could quote every line that he says in this film. He is amazing. He's probably up there with one of my favorite characters. If you've watched like this retrospective for a long time, you know that I love the really kind of bit part, random, sleazy kind of characters or just wacky characters. He is that for me, you know, with License to Kill, and I've forgotten his name now. It was the evangelist who was the front. He had like his cult, you know, his meditation place, whatever his name was. I've forgotten his name. Bless your heart, that guy.
Yeah,
I love characters like that, just really random characters. And you know, if some people said like, "Oh, it doesn't fit," I could totally see that it doesn't fit, and it's peppered in the moment where you've had this really like sad death scene with the Bond girl. And, you know, Bond's really upset about that. And then this random German guy comes in and he's like on the phone. He's like, tell them how to open the car. This is so embarrassing. Like he's like Bruno. Yeah, he's Bruno. I can't say enough positive things about him. Loved him. He's amazing.
I absolutely love him. And he's become one thing I've got on Twitter the last few months is all these designated parody accounts to supporting Bond characters. And again, only Star Wars has really had stuff like that, hasn't it? With that sort of joke thing. But Dr. Kaufman is right up there with Zoran's kind of dad, Nazi scientist.
Yes.
And I think he suits the Bro. I don't think any other Bond can do this.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if you'd have put Connery in a room with this man, Sean Connery's going to turn around and probably just slap the director or something and just walk out and go home for the day. That there's something so bad about him. Even I don't think Roger Moore could do it that well. And I just absolutely love him. And it's just the way he talks about this. I'm particularly good at the celebrity. I didn't clock he said overdose. So I thought, oh, is this meant to be like a reference to, you know, not that I'm a tin hat person, but the whole, you know, Kurt Cobain didn't commit suicide. I'm very much in that category. And I was like, is this a pun on Kurt Cobain from a couple of years ago? Mm-hmm. Obviously, it definitely wasn't. But the Dr. Kaufman scene is great. And, you know, I saw a really good Twitter thread. Oh, God, I can't remember who tweeted it. But this was literally yesterday. And they compared Dr. Kaufman to, what's his name from Russia with Love? That's really embarrassing. I've forgotten his name. Red Grant.
Yeah.
And it was fascinating. It's like, you got, not that I'm snobby of Bond, but I was like, you're comparing to that? I was like, okay, let me have a read.
Yeah.
It was great. It was actually, so if you look at the scene, it's a carbon copy of the whole suitcase moment, and it's built up really well over a couple of minutes. And it's really fascinating reading it. You know, the downfall is the gadget and Bond telling him how to use the gadget to get out of the situation. But I absolutely love him. But the bit that sells it is that he gets murdered. There's no over the top. You know, I thought, is he going to throw him out the window? Is he going to do something really funny with him? But he just point blank range assassin kills him off screen. And obviously it sets up the stamp stuff who's kind of, he's not screaming in the window, but he pulls a face when Bond climbs out. I think this was a great scene. And it sets up really well the car chase that comes after, that it's so sort of goofy. It's a great car chase, but you need something to come before it that you can take seriously about, you know, here's a remote control car being done from the back seat. And I think Dr. Kaufman was the kind of guy to do it. And he stands out. If it had just been another boring, henchman in a suit or something, you wouldn't have cared. You'd have been like, oh, it's just an assassin who's going to kill. But he had like personality, which is something
in
I
such
can't
a short
say for
scene as well. It's like
it's
minutes.
a character that just
like...
pops in and just kind of captures the screen whilst he's there.
Yeah, and he fits the Brosnan era. That is like a typical Brosnan era. Like, at least he's not called Dr. Kill or something like that, which we'll get Mr. Kill eventually. But he's so Bond-esque, it works.
It's
Mr. Kill, and what was the original name for Carver again?
Harm's Way.
Harm's Way and Mr. Kill. Could you imagine? God, sorry,
Stamper's pretty much. Stamper is also clearly,
yeah,
he's 6'6", so he stamps on people.
Yeah, that would be nice if like his character trait was that he actually like stood on people with like a boot or something like that. But no, his character just kind of pops into the film, and the fact that it is so silly and over the top, and Bond literally just turns around and immediately kind of puts him down in one of the most brutal kind of executions, shall we say, of a character. It's hilarious. But I'm with you guys. I still can't buy the fact that he is an assassin of this kind of high caliber and high quality. With
Believe it.
Kind of over the top, shall we say, dramatized.
It's like Paul Bearer.
And
do you remember Paul Bearer from WWE with the Undertaker with the golden urn? He looks exactly like him with the gaunt face as well.
But no, memorable kind of person from the film, and it did actually lead into one of my favorite scenes from the film. I don't know if we're going to talk about the car chase at all, or whether that's...
We can save that for favorite lines if you want, unless you want to talk about favorite lines now. I did just want to say really quickly, it's nice to see so much love for Dr. Kaufman. From a fellow German, Nikolai says, I love Dr. Kaufman so much. He's the best part of the movie. And the thing I did want to bring up really quickly before we move on was Mr. Gupta, who, as I said, there's not really much to say about him in the film. He's just kind of there. Apparently, the original conceit was that he was meant to have like a deadly card trick, and that was meant to be his gimmick, where he throws a card at people in a deadly way. Was it like Gambit from the X-Men? Who is this guy? And apparently there's a deleted scene with him using his cards on YouTube. Wow. So that's quite interesting. Do we want to talk about the music next, or do we want to go into favorite scenes? I'll leave it up to you guys what you want to do.
I think finish on the music, because I think the music is going to be quite a big discussion. We've kind of already talked about most of the things in the film, so I think we go into favorite scenes.
Okay. Oh shit, for me. It's probably the helicopter chase. That whole set piece with the motorbike, the stunts with the two handcuffed together, and you know that they're actually stunt people doing that as well, and the camera pulls back and you see it. There are some scenes in films where I just look at the scale of it, whether it be a set, whether it be a location and everything that's happening, and I just think I have no idea how the filmmakers achieved this. And I kind of had that with this scene. Because, I guess they filmed it on location, but there's so many different set pieces, whether they're in buildings, outside of buildings, in a crowded street, ramping over vehicles. So much happens in this sequence. With a helicopter, I love very impractical way of killing someone, but when it kind of leans forward and the propellers like chasing after them in the street, that would probably knacky a helicopter up more than anything. But I thought that was a really cool thing they did, and I knew it was happening, and I was shouting at the screen. It's when he says, like, get on the back, I need to balance the bike out. And he's going to do it. And I was shouting at the screen, like, over the helicopter, let's do it. And he does it, lands it. And I think the theme kicks in as well. The music, we'll get onto the music in a second. Fantastic. So that's probably my favorite scene in the film. I do like the bit where the Bond girl dies and you kind of have the more dramatic James Bond stuff. But if you're just talking about pure spectacle, pure action movie, which this is to me, that's probably one of the best action set pieces out of any of the James Bond films so far, in my opinion.
Yeah, I absolutely love the chase scene. I love the concept of her being sort of handcuffed to him, which is great. But the whole helicopter scene, I was looking at some behind the scenes this week with this, and I was shocked that the guy that did all the motorbike stunts, he held the world record at the time for the longest wheelie ever, 6 hours, which is
Jesus.
I don't know if anyone's been bored enough to try and break it in the last 24 years, but there's a video of this guy just walking up the ramp, just looking over at a helicopter on the ground, like weighing it all up. Apparently the heat was a massive issue at the time. That if the heat had cocked up the engine, it would have cocked the stunt up as well. And it's really fascinating looking into that. And obviously they did have a helicopter, just obviously it was turned off. It wasn't actually spinning in case it went even worse than it could have. Mm-hmm. But it's a really great stunt. Everyone was on set. Brosnan was watching from a crane above as well. It just looked incredible. So that chase scene is one of the best Bond chase scenes of all the films. I wouldn't say it's the best, but how often do we get Bond on a motorbike? I know Craig's done it a couple of times. I mean, I know we're going to get it again, but it's such an underused sort of effect where I don't think many films try motorbike stunts, and they really should, because when they're done well, they're done incredible. But this is a rarity with Bond that you get 2 chases in the same film, and each one couldn't be more different than the other, and it's great.
Well, this was actually the director, just really quickly. Spicewood said that, from Goldeneye, you had a tank chase. And he said you can't really go for a bigger vehicle than a tank, so they went completely opposite way and did a motorbike, and I think it worked perfectly.
I like that chase. That chase is actually really good, and I can always remember kind of the helicopter approaching them towards the end and stuff like that, and it's spinning. Even though the stunt is going over the helicopter is clearly kind of the best part of that chase. My favorite scene actually is the remote-controlled car chase in the car park. I just really liked that it was just kind of a payoff from like a previous kind of Bond gadget. You can control the car using this, and the fact that he has to drive it from the back seat, we already know that he's good with kind of driving it, and he already has the steering down and stuff like that. But it's just seeing a Bond car using all the gadgets. I always like seeing all the gadgets being used on a car in a film, used to its completion. So you have everything kind of playing out in that entire scene. And yeah, a great conclusion as well. He's able to jump out the car and kind of fool them, and then the car gets delivered back, like you said, to the rental as it was meant to be. I think that's just kind of fantastically done. And that smile, that damn smile that he does when he's in the back seat, kind of like yeah, just like when he's just kind of killed people behind him. But yeah, no, good.
And I'm fine with that, just how he's like instantly good at it as well. When Q introduces the gadget and he's like, now be sure to test this carefully, 007, he just snatches it and he can just do it instantly. Like usually I would have a problem with that with the character, but with a character like James Bond, it's fine. Like that's what he's good at everything. Like that's just who the character is, so it does kind of stretch the realm of plausibility, but I mean, name me a James Bond film that doesn't, right? So I'm fine with it. It's a really good, it's a creative action sequence as well. If it was another car chase, 2 car chases kind of in a film, a motorbike one and a car one, maybe too much, but with that sort of remote control thing, that was at least a cool aspect, different aspect that they added to the car chase, I felt.
What I loved as well, it's really sort of not snobby, but I've got the Sphero BB-8, which came out when Force Awakens did. Do you remember the electronic one? Mm-hmm. And it is the exact same thing. You go on an app and you have to control it off the phone. Yeah. And it's really hard to drive. And I know this isn't real still, but I love, again, I've spoken about it so many times over these films that this is tech that we get. Obviously, we don't have a real remote control car right now. But the fact that you could get a Star Wars BB-8 toy that you control off your phone that's quick and it slows down when you pull it to a stop, it's fascinating that it's just tech that, naturally people were going to catch up with. But it's just a really interesting concept as well for Bond that we've not had a car chase again, with remote control stuff and him in the back seat, no one actually driving it. There's probably loads of logistics let's do when they were filming it, all that kind of stuff. It feels like something like Top Gear when they like edit cars to look good on the TV and stuff. So it's just a really interesting concept. And I think that's what helps with it. I think most of it was shot at one like the big car parks in London, in Kent, I think, one of the shopping centres like Blue Water. And then they just had like one shot, which was flying off in real life in Hamburg. So it's a really good set piece. And also, another thing, it always reminds me of The Dark Knight. Just any like car park chase things with like guys randomly. I mean, not even Dark Knight now. I'm thinking Batman 89 as well, when they're trying to break into the car and they can't as well. I just loved all of that stuff. And again, it coincided with Dr. Kaufman.
Reminded me of Batman Begins a lot with the stingers, when like the cop cars are flipping, triggering the stingers and blowing it. Yeah, so I was getting mad Batman vibes from it as well, which we've always said, haven't we? Like Batman and Bond as characters sort of, I say very similar. I guess they are in terms of like films and, aspects about the characters, that kind of comment. Exactly. Yeah. I think that's it for favorite scenes. I can't think of any more. I mean, I just love this film anyway. We've talked about a lot of the scenes anyway, but we usually sort of like go with a main hitter. Let's talk about the music. Okay, this is a big section this week, guys. So once again, they reached out to John Barry, and there's always something with John Barry. There's always something. I love this. This is like one of my favorite things about him. Apparently, he couldn't agree on a fee with his agent at the time, so he couldn't come back for it. Oh, he's brilliant. I love him. But he actually recommended David Arnold, who is our composer of this one, who I believe has done 5 James Bond
5
scores.
in a row. Yeah.
5 in a row. And my God, this is night and day compared to Goldeneye, isn't it? Like, I think we talked about last week, what would that film have sounded like with a David Arnold score behind it? And hearing the score in this one, it would have just completely elevated that film, I think. Now, I love Goldeneye, but I think with a soundtrack like this, you know, that Bond theme is just coming in 10 to the dozen every single chance they get. The Bond fanfare is playing left, right, and center. You could argue maybe it's used a bit too many times in this film, but I'm always fine with it. I always get a kick out of it. And I actually did intend to listen to this album. It's the Shaken and Stirred, the David Arnold James Bond project. I didn't get to listen to it before this review, but it is on the back burner of something that I want to do. It's apparently an album that he produced before this film came out, which is a bunch of covers with loads of different artists and singers coming in on board with it. So, you know, John Barry gave him his blessing, essentially, and, you know, Barbara Broccoli brought David Arnold on. It's a tremendous score. I think it's up there with probably one of the best. It does feel like a Barry score in many ways, but it does elevate it, again, as we keep saying, for the 90s, for the modern era. And it's great that he got 5 films. Like, you could argue that he's, next to Barry, is the next sort of like longevity-wise Bond composer, and he's able to bring that sound to it. It's just absolutely tremendous. Now, the main theme is very interesting, and it follows in the tradition of sort of like many of the James Bond films before. And I think it was it the Living Daylights that was the first one to have two themes, wasn't it? There was the main theme and the credits theme. I think that was the first one that started that, maybe. And that's true of this one. So the main theme is by Sheryl Crow, obviously Tomorrow Never Dies. This isn't a great one for me. I'm not a big fan of this song. I think it starts off well. There's like a kind of mysticism to it, but as soon as like the pre-chorus and chorus hits, I just kind of cringe at the sound of it. It's always one that I tend to skip, put it like that. If I'm going through my playlist, it just doesn't. I like the intro, yeah, like the kind of, it creeps in, but as soon as she goes for those high notes, it just doesn't do it for me at all. Lo and behold, we hit the credits for this thing. And then this powerhouse of a song comes in, also called Tomorrow Never Dies. And I guessed at that point that maybe this was kind of in the running to be the main Bond theme, because it has a lot of the same orchestration that Arnold did in that theme. And it's K.D. Lang's Surrender. And that was meant to be the original opening Bond song. You know, he wrote the song himself. He took it to MGM, and as is usually the case with a lot of these producers, they want whoever's big at the time. K.D. Lang, you know, great singer, probably not big at the time. Sheryl Crow, get her in, she's popular. And I hate that, because this is such a superior song. It absolutely blows Sheryl Crow out of the water. I love the connective tissue it has to the actual music in the film that Arnold produced. And it's such a shame, because everyone gets up and leaves during the credits. No one's going to be sat there listening to K.D. Lang belting it out up there with Shirley Bassey as one of the best Bond songs. So it breaks my heart that it's not the main theme. There is a great edit on YouTube that someone's done where they've reinstated it in the intro, and that is its rightful place. That is an opening Bond song. Really quickly, before they got Sheryl Crow, when they turned down Arnold's entry, they opened it up to loads of people. You had Swan Lee, Pulp, Saint Etienne, Mark Almond, and then obviously eventually went to Sheryl Crow. Moby, George, the song that you played me, the James Bond theme was originally meant to be used in this film as well, which is a great version of the theme, by the way. So go and check that out if you haven't. And I think Pulp's effort, which is called Tomorrow Never Lies, which is on their B-side single from Help the Aged, is the only other one that's been released. And it's awful and terrible. And I'm very glad that it wasn't used. But if Swan Lee's is out there, Saint Etienne and all the other ones are listed, I'd love to hear them. But I don't know if they've seen the light of day or not. But yes, that is it for the music for me. The actual main theme that we get, not a fan, in all honesty. It's probably, I don't think it's the worst, but it's kind of low, very low tier for me in terms of Bond themes, I think.
The Moby one's amazing, because I kind of grew up with that song, and I think my mum was a massive Moby fan, so it was just always around, and I think it was on the Best of Bond CD we had when we were younger. I think that went up to World Is Not Enough. Didn't have Die Another Day at that point. And
no, I think you're right, because I'm pretty sure I had the same.
And I love the Moby theme, and it plays on the Blu-ray menu. So when you put the disc in, every menu has a different theme every film. And I was like, why are they playing the Moby theme? Because it obviously doesn't actually make it into the film. But I was like, yeah, but it's still the Moby theme. I'm just happy to sit there for a couple of seconds.
And it's so 90s as well, isn't it? That's what makes it so great.
It's great, and I love it. And The music. Oh, right. Okay, I'm going to do David Arnold last because I love David Arnold, but I don't mind Sheryl Crow's song. I'm just going to say it. I have a blast when it comes on in the car. You're not going to hear me singing to it properly on the motorway. Maybe one day I've done it a few times. I won't lie, but there's something about how weird the voice goes, where it sounds like a whining 16-year-old at school. But for some reason, I like it. But I always say every week, my taste in music isn't really a taste in music. I don't listen to music much, so I don't mind it. But the Surrender song, I do agree, is a better song. It should have been played. It has a lot of well does not enough vibes, which I'm glad in the next film they course correct and make sure that the garbage song is with garbage is in garbage is the name of the band. I hate that still. They obviously that is the main theme and one of the best themes. I've grown to that so much over the last few months, but it's a shame we got relegated. But I think this is again going back to the MGM stuff from the beginning. That MGM obviously had a say in the Bond theme for this one, and it's a shame. But David Arnold, I don't even know where to start. I'm not going to do a biography, but this is, I'm going to do a Star Wars comparison, right? You've got John Barry, who is your John Williams, and then you get the Mandalorian, it's Ludwig Göransson, and here is a new. I mean, it's not really authentic in the sense of it doesn't sound like Star Wars, but this is someone that's made it his own from his right away. 5 minutes into that Mandalorian episode 1, this is Star Wars. This sounds right. This is different, and there's a kind of David Arnold effect where it just still sounds like James Bond. But this is a guy that's come in and ended up scoring five soundtracks in a row. And the only reason he didn't do Skyfall is because Sam Mendes always works with Thomas Newman.
Yeah.
And, I'm not going to be the one that criticizes Hans Zimmer. That's a dream for me to see him do a Bond film. I think David Arnold could still come back in the future and do more Bond. I think he is such an important figure for where they were able to take the music that, the Barry scores were great, but in between a lot of the Barry ones, there was always inconsistencies, when the Rocky composer just turned up for one film.
Yeah.
And whenever Barry would come and go, and it made it really hard for any other composer to come in and really get the teeth into it. I think David Arnold has that. The fact he did 5 in a row, and I was thinking about this earlier. When they rebooted it with Casino Royale, who stays? Judi Dench's M. David Arnold stayed, and normally in reboots they always get rid of the composers and bring in new stuff as well. So that was something really interesting, and I think Casino Royale is his best score of the 5 he did too. But he is an absolute unit for what he did. And I listened to the Shaken and Stirred album today for the very first time. Again, music is not my forte, so I'm just not going to say anything else.
Well, Nikolai said that it makes me want to listen to it even more. He says that the covers is absolutely brilliant. I'm going to love it. I will get around to it. I did intend, as I mentioned, to listen to it before this one, but couldn't fit it in. But it's on the back burner.
I was going to say, this is the first time I'm hearing of this album, and I really want to listen to it now. No, I'll start off with David Arnold because growing up with these Bond films, growing up with the Pierce Brosnan ones, kind of the first ones that I would go and kind of see in a cinema and stuff like that. Not specifically this film, but kind of Die Another Day, and then on to kind of Casino Royale as well. It's embedded into my mind, like the scores of those films, and that is kind of what he brought to the table. And he always had that kind of, it's a Bond theme. It's very different to the stuff that Barry was doing, but at the same time, it still feels as part of continuity that it's the same. And especially in this film, he brought back kind of the Bond kind of actual main theme coming into the film and being played over the big moments, which I always liked. I always liked it. Oh, Bond's done something which is quintessentially Bond. We should play his main theme. That is Bond. That is what should happen. I think you mentioned that it was done too much. Nah, I think it was done perfectly right in this film. It's one of the only things which I think was done absolutely flawless in this film. But the music in this film, just in general, is very well done. Tomorrow Never Dies, Sheryl Crow. I actually quite like this Bond theme. I think Brosnan era has 3 good Bond songs and then one which, dear God,
is great too.
I'm with Tayte on that one, George. I'm sorry.
I will stay in my corner.
About the fact that we
Sigmund
know exactly
Freud.
what we're talking about.
Analyze this.
Oh Christ, it's awful. But one thing I will mention, the song I actually like. I think it's quite a strong one. It's quite a powerfully sung one. I do like the K.D. Lang one as well. I think that is strong, and I did it's one of the only films where I've kind of sat back and I enjoy watching the credits now. I think it's become kind of a thing where end credit sequence in films, you kind of stay behind a bit more and you kind of watch it and you kind of absorb it in and stuff like that. For this film, as soon as the song started playing, I just couldn't turn it off. I was like, I need to listen to this all the way through, and it's very, very well done, Surrender. Do I think it's better than the actual main theme? I quite like the main theme, like with Tomorrow Never Dies by Sheryl Crow, so I would still stick by Sheryl Crow on that one. But one thing I do not like is the actual title sequence. I
love that.
It has not aged well at all.
I thought it was great for the age it's from, though.
It's good for the age it's from, but there's good for the age it's from and then not aging well at all. And all of the other previous, maybe apart from Goldeneye, that was kind of the new sequences coming in. All of the other ones with the silhouettes and stuff like that have aged well. This one going digital, I don't think has in the same way. And it's that kind of old, like practical versus kind of CGI kind of thing. And I just preferred the older ones. This one, I don't think works the same way. Maybe it was too light. I think all the previous Bond kind of intro sequences are kind of blacked out with the silhouettes and you've got fire and loads of different lights going off and stuff like that. This one was kind of almost on a white background throughout the entire thing. I don't know whether that was what I didn't like about it, but it just didn't sit right with me.
I actually love the title sequence. It might be one of my favorites in terms of visuals. There are some things that are questionable in it. There's certain moments where it almost looks like an orbit of diamonds. And I thought, are we going to have like another Diamonds Are Forever type? It is like mad Diamonds Are Forever vibes from like the opening titles. But
quick question: was that Sheryl Crow in the title sequence?
I wondered that too. I haven't seen the music video, so I'm not
like
sure.
Sheryl Crow.
It's when she skydives and like crashes through her face. You're talking about that?
Yeah, it's her actual face is on the screen.
It might be. I know they did that with For Your Eyes Only, didn't they? Yeah. They had Sheena Easton, wasn't it? I think it was who did that song. She was in the title sequence for it. I loved it. As soon as I saw the coding, though, all the binary 00110, I thought, oh, here we go. We've got a technology Bond film here, and you know, I think it's just I prefer Surrender. The last thing I'll say on it is because obviously that was the one that was all good to go. It was in the can. You know, you have the orchestral comparison there with like the brass hook in it, and the lyrics just fit the film way more. Like the opening line, "Your life is a story I've already written." Like that is, it's all exclusively about the villain. The news is that I am in control and I have the power. It's all to do with Jonathan Pryce's character, and they fucked it up. And I hate MGM for that. But you know, moving on. At least I know next week we've got another great Bond theme though, with The World Is Not Enough, because I do love that one.
Nikolai says it was not Sheryl Crow. And he admires me for defending my correct opinion on Dino. 2 weeks.
Maybe when I watch it in the film, you know, like I'm open to it. Listen, if I watch it in the film, it might work. I've heard that the Scorpion edits.
I was going to say, I always say this: the Die of a Day credits is great, and I will defend that too. I'm not going to give anything else away because you've not seen it, Chris.
Well,
and it's actually story purpose. 2 weeks away. We're so close. I'm so excited. Just imagine that was the film that destroyed James Bond. I mean, that would have like ended the entire thing, which almost was License to Kill, not Die Another Day. So don't come at me too quickly, Dalton fans. I don't even know where do we go from this.
One-liners, right?
One-liners.
One-liners.
I don't think I have that many from this film. I'm gonna lie. This is the only thing I'm going to say about the one-liners for me before Chris reads them out, because you've got the list, and I watched it on Thursday very late. Every single time Bond speaks to Elliot Carver in this film, up until the final acts, when they're having the fight on the stealth boat that's not stealthy at all, James Bond speaks to him in one-liners about the news, and I am here for it.
I can't remember what the exact line is, but it's the line that he says after Elliot is killed. And it was so... I heard it, I was like, oh, that's bad.
I actually don't have that one written down, but I know the one
Nikolai's got it. They'll print anything these days. There you go.
No, that was...
that's in the factory. That's in the factory.
Yeah.
The weirdest
I have that one written down.
He fell into
like a printing press, isn't it? He throws him into or something, I think.
Yeah, but it's not a long drop, but he's bleeding apparently and bled enough to go on the paper.
Okay, I guess that falls to me. I'm just having a look at... Okay, I think that's going to get my number one. The film actually opens with a really strong one from Bond. I've already mentioned the backseat driver one, but he's like, I'm just up here in Oxford brushing up on a little Danish when he's necking with the woman at the beginning. That was funny. Print anything these days. Okay, Jonathan Pryce gets a terrible one. So I wrote it down because it is a pun, but it's just awful. He's my new anchorman. And I think it's when he tips the guy overboard, doesn't he, or something, or he sinks. I can't remember what happens, but I know that was one. Then you got the final one. They're looking for his James. Let's stay undercover. So it's not a one-liner, but I wanted to talk about the bit. We kind of mentioned it already and alluded to it. The bit where Jonathan Pryce is like mimicking Michelle Yeoh. He's like, whoa, 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 and he's like doing all this. And we did a GIF earlier. You guys can memorize the moves of what he did there. And you just mentioned Bill Conti not too long ago when we're talking about the music, and it reminds me of when Terry Silver's taking the piss out of Mr. Miyagi. He's like, whoa, whoa. It's just that'd be a match made in heaven, those two together. I want to see that film. But I think my favorite one-liner, and I think the one that's going to take it, is it's more of an exchange than a one-liner. M says, remind her, then pump her for information. And then Moneypenny says, you'll just have to decide how much pumping is needed, James. I think that's going to get it for this one. That was a good one. That was a solid exchange of one-liners there. And a really, really quick side note, I don't know if you guys noticed this at all. There are so many stock sound effects in this film that it was hilarious.
Yes.
You've got any editing software or anything, you've heard these. It's when Bond's getting beaten up in that side room, in the soundproof room. The punch sound effects are hilarious, and I was just like laughing at the screen. But the one that got it for me is when Michelle Yeoh shoots a control panel with a machine gun, and it's got like the classic plate smashing sound effect. And it sounds like crockery breaking, and I don't know why that would, when you're shooting like an electronic keyboard, I don't know why you'd get a plate smashing sound effect. So that just made me like bust a gut laughing when that happened, because you hear it in loads of things. It's a stock sound effect for that reason. But yeah, I don't know if I was the only one who noticed it.
No, but with the 90s stuff, I think it was Spy Hard spoke about in their video that they mentioned that if you look at this, they're going for that traditional, because obviously like you look at like John Woo and people like that, there was a clear like a mid-90s influence with like martial arts films. And anytime there's a kick or punch, it's kind of the sound effects they put in as well. So they were kind of making the point that it feels like they're trying to follow in those footsteps of the John Woo films, and which is really interesting. I just want to mention Nikolai's got the Elliot Carver quote. You've got the first rules edit, give the people what they want. It's really hard not to read it in Pierce Brosnan's accent. Yeah. Again, and I think because the death is so brutal, that one-liner looks even better from it.
Does it?
You've also got another one here that Nikolai says, and actually, I was going to write this one down, but I think that Austin Powers does it better. You've always been a cunning linguist, James. I know there's a line in Austin Powers when he says, I may be what is it? You might be a cunning linguist, but I'm a master debater or something, he says, which is great. And I think that trumps even that one. So I give that one to Austin Powers. That's going to be we got to pick a one-liner from Austin Powers when we get to that. That's going to be like the whole movie.
Quote the whole film word for word. That's just the review. But anyway, if we're going to final thoughts on the film, it's for me, it's like a mid-tier, kind of low mid-tier film for me. I think there was a lot of potential to go further, but there were just certain clashes in kind of the theme of the film and the delivery of the film, and just certain parts of the film which I just didn't get on with. I think George, you actually mentioned this. This film would have worked really well if it was in the Daniel Craig era, and if it went for that darker tone. And I think it's maybe because I'm wishing for something like that, that I'm not as big of a fan as this as you guys, but I enjoyed it as a kid. It was an okay watch through the second or third time around I've watched it. First time kind of properly through analytic eyes, but yeah, it's a kind of middle of the road, kind of like we said at the start. It's a by the numbers James Bond film. It's exactly what you're going to expect when you're watching it.
By the numbers isn't exactly bad for me, and I think that's why I like this one. It is, it follows the formula very well. If I'm going to throw on one that's just kind of like an action movie, I think I'd throw this one on. This is just like a solid, entertaining, get in and get out, does the action very well. You've got some great car chases in there. I think the villain's really interesting. He's just the right level of hamminess for me. And I just think the conceit of the villain's really interesting and different for the Bond franchise, so I really latched onto that. And I think I was just in the mood for it. I was ready for the next Bond film. I think going into it, as I mentioned, a lot of people from what I gauge, were kind of lukewarm on this one, or it's one that never really gets mentioned all that much. We always say, you have Goldeneye, you have Die Another Day, which are memorable for very different reasons, but they're memorable for reasons. And then you've got the middle two, and this, and as I mentioned, next week's I knew nothing about, and I still know nothing about next week's, but so it was kind of refreshing to just go into this one completely blind. I had a great time with it. I think, when we rank Bond films, we always say there's the elite, which is like your usual 5 or 6 films, which always get mentioned. This is it's not the elite tier, but it's higher up in the tier below it, I think, for me. I really enjoyed it. I think Brosnan definitely feels more at home in the role in this one. Jonathan Pryce is fantastic. And I think the action's just shot very well, and there's some creative new things in there as it becomes more modernized. But it still does follow and is quite tethered to a lot of the beats and the formula that you come to expect. And that's not really a problem for me when it comes to a Bond film.
Yeah, I think it's the it's like a mid-tier but below the top, to kind of what you're saying, Chris, that it's up there with like your Octopussies, not as high as Octopussy, but like a couple or below that. It's in this sort of, it's good, but it's not up there. And I think it makes like a solid viewing experience. If you want a Bond film on, you can put this one on. You're going to be entertained. You've got the action, you've got the set pieces, you've got the villain. Maybe not the henchman, maybe not the Bond girls, but you've got enough there to kick back and enjoy yourself for 2 hours. It's got Pierce Brosnan in the film. You can't go wrong with it, really. And adding in what we've not been able to say for quite a while is you've got a phenomenal score to go with it, which is something that's, we're going to get used to, which is a blessing. Again, David Arnold's coming to the rescue, but it's a Bond film that's left out of conversations, and I wouldn't say it's forgettable. It's just that there's been others more memorable for different reasons. And I think this is where it also, even against the world's not enough, it comes under that. We're not quite in the 2000s yet. We're still in that 90s. We're still figuring out where we're going to be going. But looking at this with modern lenses was really fascinating because of how real a film of this subject matter truly can be. We're not going to get a World War III, but who knows with what's going on at the moment. So it's one of them where I think time has probably done this a favor compared to maybe when this came out. And a big thing worth mentioning, you're never going to be able to follow up Goldeneye. You look at the absolute creme de la creme of Bond films, bar none of them have had a follow-up worthy to what came before it. Maybe From Russia with Love to Goldfinger, you've got an argument, but License to Kill to Goldeneye doesn't count because of that 6-year gap. That's two completely different things. So it's a really interesting one, looking at the legacy and everything else, but I think it's solid. I have a lot of fun with it. And, I'm intrigued to see where it's going to be in my rankings. Will it make the top 10? That's my question now. So very curious, very excited. But I'm at least now we've done this, I can literally get the World Is Not Enough on as soon as possible.
Yeah, absolutely. And that will be our next one. But before we get on to that, let us know your thoughts on Tomorrow Never Dies. We've had some people commenting along tonight. And again, thank you for everyone who's tuned in and shared your thoughts on this one in the live chat. If you are discovering this now, because we know that these are very long reviews, maybe you don't have time to watch them tonight. If you do get to it, do drop us a comment. Let us know your thoughts on the film, where you think it stacks up with all the other ones in the Brosnan era, or anything just about James Bond in general. We love talking Bond. This is why we've extended this retrospective in many ways. We're loving it. We're loving the people. We're loving talking about this every week. So be sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe. And as George just mentioned, we are jumping to 1999 on next week's one with The World Is Not Enough. That's going to be Tuesday, the 24th of August, the cusp of the new millennium, 1999. What a vintage year it was. It was the year that just kept on giving, didn't it? Phantom Menace, so many things that year. But yeah, like you, I can't wait to jump into another James Bond film and get it watched ASAP. So that's going to be our one for next week. It's kind of almost bittersweet though, because the closer we get, the closer we get to Die Another Day, but it's like we're going to be saying goodbye to another Bond era in a couple of weeks' time, and these things are just going so quick. But we hope you can all join us for that one as well. I believe we can announce who's going to be on that with us, can't we, George?
Yeah, so we're getting really 007 there coming back on. We've got John confirmed, and we may also have Tom coming back. So they do already have a review on their channel back from last year, so if you want to get a head start, check that out. It's got a lot of chapters, so have a listen of them. Come to us. I've not listened to theirs yet. I'm gonna have fun rewatching it. It's a very personal film, so if you haven't already figured everything out by now, next week's going to be an interesting one for that discussion piece. Probably the most personal of all the Bond films to me. So I've been looking forward to this for a very, very long time, and I'm so excited to be able to watch it. So absolutely stick with us, hit that subscribe button, turn the alerts on, and do come back next Tuesday.
Absolutely. And, if you want to follow... Oh, sorry. Tayte,
Yeah, no, I was going to may as well. Yeah,
go ahead, man.
Social medias and stuff like that. Always the place to follow us on all of our content. So you go onto Facebook /Cinema Savvy, Twitter cinema_savvy, Letterboxd is Cinema Savvy as well, and then go into the link description for TeePublic, where you can pick up t-shirts or incredibly, I cannot state how comfy these jumpers are. They are ridiculously comfy. So go pick up one from there.
Absolutely.
And not the James Bond store at £300. Because they're now selling the Freddie Mercury mask from No Time to Die for £800 for a set of two as of today.
What?
Jesus.
That's madness.
And it's sold out inside 5 minutes.
Oh, that's mad.
So instead of spending a ridiculous amount of money on that, go and buy a t-shirt or a jumper from us.
I want to buy the Hawaiian shirt that American guy had in this film. So I'm gonna hit up one of those stores. Or if I'm balling on a budget and I want to dress as Freddie Mercury, I'll just get one of those like plain white Halloween masks that are like 99p. Anyway, that'll do it for us, guys. We'll see you on the next one. Take care.